The smell of burning flesh is something you never forget. It's sweet and acrid at the same time, like caramelized meat mixed with singed hair. That smell filled our living room as I looked down at the perfect triangular burn mark on my forearm, still smoking, the iron steam setting having made it worse. My sister Celine stood there holding the iron like a weapon, her face twisted with satisfaction. We'd been arguing about her taking my laptop without permission, again, when she grabbed the iron from the board where I'd been pressing my work uniform. That's what trash gets for existing, my mother laughed from the doorway, wine glass in hand at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Maybe now you'll learn to keep your mouth shut. My father, watching from his recliner, didn't even look up from his phone. If I were her, I'd have burned your face too. At least then you'd have an excuse for being so ugly. I didn't cry, not one tear. I just stood there, feeling my skin bubble and blister, watching my family's faces, waiting for someone, anyone, to show concern, to call an ambulance, to act like I was a human being who'd just been assaulted with a 400-degree weapon. Instead, Celine set the iron back on the board and laughed. Look, she's too stupid to even react. Maybe I damaged her brain. Can't damage what doesn't exist, Mom added, taking another sip of her Chardonnay. I was 17 years old, 2 weeks from graduation, and I'd just received my acceptance letter to Stanford that morning. They didn't know about Stanford. They didn't know about a lot of things. I need to bandage this, I said quietly, my voice eerily calm. Drama queen, Celine rolled her eyes. It's barely a mark. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and examined the wound. 2nd-degree burn, easily. The pattern of the iron steam holes was perfectly visible in my flesh. I took photos from every angle, then carefully cleaned and dressed it with the first aid supplies I'd learned to keep hidden under the sink. Then I sat on the bathroom floor and planned their destruction. You see, what my family didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for 3 years. Every bruise, every cruel word, every incident. What they also didn't know was that I'd been accepted to Stanford on a full scholarship, that I'd been working as a freelance programmer since I was 14, and that I had $47,000 saved in an account they knew nothing about. But most importantly, what they didn't know was that I discovered something about our family that would destroy everything they'd built their superiority complex on. I went to my room and pulled out the box hidden behind my dresser. Inside were documents I found in my grandmother's attic before she died, documents my parents thought had been destroyed in a fire years ago. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, immigration papers, and one very interesting adoption certificate with my name on it. I wasn't their biological daughter. I'd been adopted when I was 2, after my biological parents, my father's brother and his wife, died in a car accident. They'd taken me in for the insurance money and the monthly Social Security benefits. $2,400 a month for 15 years. That's $432,000 they collected while calling me trash, worthless, a burden. But here's the kicker. My biological parents had been wealthy, very wealthy, and they'd set up a trust for me that my adoptive parents had been stealing from for years, telling the lawyers I was mentally incompetent and needed them to manage it. The trust was supposed to transfer to me fully at 18, just 2 weeks away. It was worth $3.2 million, or it had been, before they drained nearly half of it. I pulled up the email I'd been drafting to the law firm that managed the trust, attached the documentation of abuse, the photos of injuries spanning 3 years, and today's fresh burn. Then I added screenshots of text messages where my parents discussed using the retard's money for Celine's college and their new house. But I didn't send it, not yet. First, I had preparations to make. That evening at dinner, I sat quietly while they laughed about the burn. Show everyone your new tattoo, Celine said, grabbing my bandaged arm and squeezing the burn. I didn't flinch, even though the pain was excruciating. Leave her alone, Dad said, and for a moment I thought, but no, she's depressing to look at. Ruins my appetite. I excused myself and went to my room, where I spent the night backing up every piece of evidence to 3 different cloud services and a physical drive I'd hide at school. Then I did something else. I hacked into Celine's social media accounts. Not to post anything, just to download her messages. The ones where she bragged about bullying me, where she shared photos of my injuries with her friends, laughing about them, where she admitted to stealing from my room and selling my things. My mother's computer was even easier. She used password 123 for everything. I found emails between her and my aunt discussing how they'd hidden my biological parents' will, how they convinced the lawyers I was mentally disabled, how they planned to drain the trust completely before I turned 18. My father's phone backup to the family computer yielded the most damaging evidence. He'd been embezzling from his company for years, using the money he stole from my trust to cover his tracks. He'd also been having an affair with his secretary, using my trust fund money to pay for her apartment. I screenshot everything, every crime, every admission, every piece of evidence. The next day at school, I showed the burn to the nurse. She was horrified. "How did this happen?" she asked, documenting it with photos. My sister pressed an iron to my arm during an argument. My parents watched and laughed. She called the police immediately, then CPS, then the principal. By lunch, I was sitting in the principal's office with 2 police officers, a social worker, and a detective who specialized in child abuse cases. "I want to press charges," I said calmly, "and I have evidence of years of abuse as well as financial fraud." I handed over a USB drive with everything, organized into folders by date, by type of abuse, by perpetrator. The detective's eyes widened as she scrolled through it. "This is extensive," she said. "How long have you been documenting this?" 3 years, since I was 14 and realized no one would believe me without proof. But the financial fraud goes back 15 years. That afternoon, while I was still at school, the police arrested my sister at her community college for assault with a deadly weapon. My parents were arrested at their workplaces, my mother for child abuse and my father for child abuse and embezzlement once the police contacted his company with the evidence I provided. The social worker placed me in emergency foster care, but I showed her my Stanford acceptance letter and my bank statements. "I turn 18 in 2 weeks," I said. "I can take care of myself until then." She agreed to let me stay with my friend Jamie's family, who'd always suspected something was wrong at my house. That evening, the story hit the local news. Local honor student suffers years of abuse, parents and sister arrested. The iron burn was the lead image, brutal and undeniable. But I wasn't done. I contacted the law firm managing my trust with all the evidence. They immediately froze what was left of it and began criminal proceedings to recover what had been stolen. I also contacted my father's company with the evidence of his embezzlement. They found over $800,000 missing, traced directly to him. My biological parents' will, which my adoptive parents had hidden, revealed more. There was a house in my biological parents' names, rental properties, investment accounts, all being managed by a trustee who turned out to be my adoptive father using forged documents. Within a week, my family's life had imploded completely. Celine was expelled from college after her social media messages were leaked, showing her bragging about abusing me. No other school would accept her with pending assault charges. My mother lost her job when her employer saw the news. Her wine-fueled rants on social media about how I was an ungrateful brat who deserved everything she got didn't help her case. My father was facing 20 years in prison for embezzlement, fraud, and child abuse. His company sued him for the stolen funds. His mistress disappeared the moment his assets were frozen. They lost the house. Turns out it was double mortgaged using my forged signature. The cars were repossessed. Everything they'd built with stolen money crumbled. At my sister's trial, she tried to claim it was an accident. The prosecutor played a video from her friend's Instagram story, filmed moments after the burning, where Celine was laughing and reenacting how she pressed the iron to my arm while her friends cheered. She got 3 years in prison and a permanent criminal record. My mother's trial was next. Her own wine-fueled texts and emails condemning me as trash and discussing how to drain my trust were her downfall. 2 years in prison and loss of any claim to my biological parents' estate. My father's trial was the grand final. Embezzlement, fraud, child abuse, identity theft. The charges kept mounting. The forensic accountants found he'd stolen not just from my trust and his company, but from my biological parents' estate, using his position as my guardian to secretly sell off assets and pocket the money. 15 years in federal prison. During the trials, the full extent of my biological parents' estate was revealed. After recovering the stolen assets and adding the interest and penalties my adoptive parents owed, it was worth nearly $5 million. All of it went to me on my 18th birthday. I sat in the courtroom as each of them was sentenced, wearing long sleeves to hide the iron burn that had started it all. When they were led away in handcuffs, each of them looked at me with such hatred, such disbelief that the trash had destroyed them. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched impassively as they were taken to begin their sentences. But the real satisfaction came later, when I was setting up my dorm room at Stanford. I decided to study law, inspired by the prosecutors who'd fought for me. On my desk, I placed a small framed photo, not of my adoptive family, but of my biological parents, recovered from the documents my adoptive parents had tried to hide. Next to it, I placed a printed email from the law firm managing my estate. Your trust has been fully restored with interest and penalties. Current value, $5.3 million. And finally, a medical report, healing progress on iron burn, minimal scarring expected with continued treatment. That burn had been meant to mark me as trash, as worthless as less than human. Instead, it became the catalyst for my freedom and their destruction. My roommate noticed the burn scar one day and asked about it. Cooking accident, I said simply, but it taught me something important. What's that? That sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the keys to our liberation. She nodded, not pushing further. That night, I got a call from Jamie, my friend whose family had taken me in during those crucial 2 weeks. Did you see the news? She asked. Your sister got attacked in prison. Apparently, the other inmates don't like child abusers. I hope she's okay, I said, and I meant it. Not because I forgave her, but because I was genuinely free from caring about any of them anymore. You're a better person than me, Jamie said. No, I replied, touching the raised scar on my arm. I'm just someone who learned that the best revenge isn't wishing harm on those who hurt you. It's ensuring they face the consequences of their own actions while you thrive despite them. The scar from the iron never fully faded. It remained as a raised triangular mark on my forearm. Sometimes people asked about it, and I'd give different answers depending on my mood. But I never hid it. It was proof of what I'd survived, evidence of the moment my family revealed exactly who they were, and a reminder that I'd taken their worst and transformed it into my freedom. They called me trash and said I deserved to burn. Instead, I'd risen from those ashes while they burned in the hell of their own making. And I didn't even have to light the match. They'd done that themselves the moment they pressed that iron to my skin.
The cake was perfect. 4 layers of vanilla sponge with strawberry cream, decorated with tiny handcrafted sugar roses. It sat on a linen-covered table on the sprawling back lawn of the Delgado estate, a perfect centerpiece for my daughter, Isabella's perfect first birthday party. Everything was perfect, which is how the Delgados liked it. Perfect house, perfect son, perfect image. It's a shame it was all built on a foundation of rot. I'm Angela. I'm 32, and for the last 5 years I've been married to Luis Delgado. Today, however, felt less like a celebration and more like the beginning of the end. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and my mother-in-law's expensive perfume. Regina Delgado, a woman of 58 who carried herself with the unshakable confidence of a monarch, was holding court near the French doors, a half-empty glass of Chardonnay in her hand. Her husband, Kenneth, a quiet, imposing man of 62, stood by the grill, his silence a familiar wall. My husband, Luis, who at 34 still possessed the easy charm that had first drawn me in, was mingling with guests, flashing his perfect smile. He was the golden son, the heir to the Delgado name, and the reason I was standing in this beautiful, suffocating prison. The party was winding down when Regina decided to make her move. She glided to the centre of the patio, her voice, sharpened by wine, cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation. "Oh, everyone, you simply must see this." She held up a framed photograph. It was a baby picture of Luis, his face round and serious, with a shock of dark hair. A few guests chuckled politely. "Doesn't he look just like his father?" Regina cooed, glancing at Kenneth, who gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod. Then, her eyes cold and assessing, landed on me. I was holding Isabella, who was sleepily rubbing her face against my shoulder. "It's funny, isn't it?" Regina continued, her voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in. You look at this picture of Luis and you see a Delgado through and through, but then you look at little Isabella. She let the sentence hang in the air, a poisonous vapour. I just don't see the resemblance, not to Luis anyway. The chatter stopped. The air crackled. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, on my daughter. I looked at Luis, pleading with my expression alone for him to step in, to say something, to shut this down. He met my gaze for a fraction of a second before looking away. A weak, apologetic smile plastered on his face. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic he'd had since I met him. In that moment, the silence wasn't just a lack of words, it was a betrayal sharper than any accusation. Regina took his silence as an invitation to escalate. I'm just saying, Angela, that a child should look like her father. It's a simple biological fact. Her smile was a cruel slash of red lipstick, unless, of course, there's a reason she doesn't. There it was, the accusation laid bare for all their friends and family to witness. Humiliation washed over me, hot and swift. My hands trembled slightly as I held my daughter closer. This wasn't the first time Regina had implied such a thing, but it was the first time she'd done it so publicly. But then, a strange calm settled over me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I looked up from my daughter's soft hair and met my mother-in-law's gaze. I let a small, serene smile touch my lips. The sight of it seemed to unnerve her more than tears or anger ever could. You're right, Regina, I said, my voice even and clear. A child should look like her father. And family transparency is so important. I paused, letting everyone absorb my agreement. Luis looked relieved, probably thinking I was about to fold. So I agree, I continued, my smile widening. Let's do a DNA test for Isabella, to prove once and for all that she is Luis's daughter. A wave of shock rippled through the remaining guests. Regina's smug expression faltered for a second. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. In fact, I added, turning to address the whole family, my eyes sweeping over a stunned Luis and a stone-faced Kenneth. Why stop there? To ensure there are absolutely no questions about the Delgado lineage, let's make it a family-wide affair. Me, Luis, Isabella, you, Kenneth, full transparency, let's clear the air for good. Regina stared at me, caught in the trap of her own making. To refuse now would be to admit she was just being malicious. Her pride wouldn't allow it. After a tense moment, her smugness returned, tenfold. She thought she was calling my bluff. She thought she had me cornered. An excellent idea, dear, she said, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. An excellent idea indeed. She had no idea. She couldn't possibly know that I'd spent the last 6 months quietly piecing together a puzzle she and Kenneth had buried over 30 years ago. She thought this was her victory. She didn't realise she had just handed me the shovel to dig up her own grave. The last of the guests trickled out, leaving behind a graveyard of champagne flutes and crumpled napkins. The perfect cake was half-eaten, its sugar roses wilting under the evening sky. Regina stood by the fireplace, swirling the last of her wine, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She thought she had won. She saw my calm agreement as a sign of surrender, a desperate, foolish gambit. She didn't understand that her smile was the smile of the condemned, blissfully unaware of the executioner sharpening the axe. This wasn't an impulsive decision. My plan had been unfolding in silence for 6 months, ever since a rainy Tuesday afternoon spent in the dusty, neglected attic of this very house. I'd been looking for a box of old holiday decorations when I stumbled upon a heavy, leather-bound photo album. It was filled with pictures from the year before Luis was born. There was Regina, young and vibrant, standing next to Kenneth on a beach vacation. There she was, at a Christmas party, wearing a sleek, form-fitting dress. The date on the back of the photo read, December 1987. Luis was born in March of 1988. In every single picture from the months leading up to his birth, Regina was impossibly, undeniably slender. There was no baby bump, not a hint of one. I sat on the dusty floor, the smell of mothballs and old paper filling my lungs, and stared at the smiling woman in the photograph. It was a small thing, an inconsistency most people would overlook. But in a family as obsessed with its own history as the Delgados, it was a chasm. I started cross-referencing dates, looking at other photos, reading old letters. The story they told and the story the pictures showed didn't line up. That was the day the first seed of my plan was planted. Regina's constant biting remarks about my supposed inadequacies were no longer just insults. They were the desperate deflections of a woman guarding a secret. After the party, once Isabella was asleep in her crib, I locked myself in the guest bathroom and called my best friend Violet. She actually did it, I whispered into the phone, my voice tight, in front of everyone. "Angie, are you okay?" Violet's voice was a warm, steady anchor. "What did you do?" "What did Luis do?" "I agreed," I said, "and I raised the stakes, a full family test." I told her the rest. There was a long pause on the other end. "You're really going through with it then, the whole thing?" It wasn't a question. She left me no choice, Vi, and Luis, he just stood there. He let her. The sting of that betrayal was still fresh, more painful than the accusation itself. "This is going to be a mushroom cloud, you know that," she warned gently. "Are you ready for that?" "I'm not the one who planted the bomb," I said. "I'm just flipping the switch." After I hung up with Violet, I sent a text to my younger sister, Quinn. She's 29, fiercely protective, and works as a paralegal, which has made her exceptionally good at digging up things people want to keep hidden. "It's on, phase 2. Her reply came back almost instantly. "Sending you what I found. Call me." I opened the file she emailed me. It was a scanned copy of a hospital birth record from the county archives. Luis Delgado, born March 12, 1988. Mother, Regina Delgado. Father, Kenneth Delgado. It all looked official. But Quinn had highlighted a small notation at the bottom, a record of amendment filed 6 weeks after the original certificate. It was a legal, if uncommon, procedure. But why would a birth certificate need to be amended? I called her. "What am I looking at?" "I had to pull some strings to get the original filing record," Quinn said, her voice buzzing with energy. "The amendment was to add Kenneth's name to the father's line. The original certificate left that field blank." My blood ran cold. "Blank?" "Completely blank, Angie, like the father was unknown. Or, at least, unlisted." I leaned against the cool marble of the bathroom counter, my reflection staring back at me. A woman who looked calm, composed, but whose world was tilting on its axis. Regina hadn't just hidden a pregnancy, she had lied on a legal document. She had built her son's entire identity on a foundation that was starting to crumble, and I had my hand on the detonator. A week after the party, a small, discreet cardboard box arrived. It sat on the polished mahogany table in the grand foyer, an unassuming Trojan horse in the heart of the Delgado estate. Inside were 5 DNA test kits, each sealed in sterile plastic. Their presence sucked the air out of the room. Regina breezed past the table, pausing just long enough to glance at the box. "Well, isn't this modern?" she said, a tight, dismissive smile on her face, getting to the truth with a bit of spit. How very efficient. She was trying to project confidence, but I saw the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted a vase of lilies. She still thought the only secret at risk was mine. Kenneth was a ghost. He moved through the house with a heavy, deliberate silence, his eyes fixed on some distant point over my shoulder. He wouldn't look at me, at Luis, or at the box. He was a man waiting for a sentence to be read. Luis, on the other hand, was desperate to pretend none of this was happening. "Can we just get this over with, Ang?" he'd asked me the night before. Humiliate Mum, prove your point, and let's move on. He didn't understand this was never just about proving a point. It was about razing a rotten structure to the ground. The next day, I made an appointment with Dave Walker, the family lawyer and Louise's godfather. My excuse was perfectly reasonable. I wanted to discuss setting up a trust for Isabella and clarifying her inheritance rights, given the unfortunate questions that had been raised about her paternity. Dave's office was old-world luxury, leather chairs, dark wood, the faint smell of paper and scotch. He was a man in his early 60s, with a kind face that didn't quite reach his shrewd eyes. He'd known the Delgados for 40 years. "Angela, this whole situation is a shame," he began, settling into his chair. "A family squabble that's gone too far." "I agree," I said smoothly, "which is why I want to make sure Isabella is protected, legally, no ambiguities." I leaned forward slightly. "I used to work as a researcher at a law firm before Isabella was born. I know how important ironclad documentation is, especially with complex family estates." I let that hang in the air. It was a subtle reminder that I wasn't just some emotional daughter-in-law. I knew how to read the fine print. "Of course," Dave said, a little too quickly. "Isabella is Louise's heir, there's no question." "But what if there was?" I pressed gently. "Hypothetically, say, if a birth certificate had been amended after the fact, could that create complications down the line?" The colour drained from Dave Walker's face. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible shift, but I saw it. He knew. He cleared his throat, shuffled some papers on his desk, and suddenly became very busy. "That's a highly unusual and specific hypothetical, Angela. I can assure you the Delgado family records are all in perfect order." His denial was all the confirmation I needed. He was a part of it. That night, I went back to my own investigation. The attic had become my sanctuary of secrets. I pulled out the old photo albums again, this time looking for faces that weren't Delgados. And there he was, in picture after picture from Regina's college years, Wyatt Gardner. Wyatt was 59 now, our quiet, brooding neighbour who lived in the house his parents had owned for decades. He was a family friend, always present at holidays, always on the periphery. In the old photos he was young, intense, and always standing next to Regina. They weren't just friends. The way he looked at her, the way her hand rested on his arm, it was obvious. I found Regina's college yearbook tucked into a box of old report cards. I flipped through the pages, past the smiling faces and cheesy club photos, until I found her portrait. Underneath, in the section for personal messages, was a scrawled inscription. "Regina, my love for you is the one thing that will never change. No matter what happens or where we end up, remember that. Always. W.G. W.G. Wyatt Gardner." They had been in love. Deeply, it seemed. And this was just before she abruptly dropped out of school and married Kenneth Delgado, a man 4 years her senior, whom she barely seemed to know in the photos from the year before. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The blank space on the birth certificate, the rushed marriage, the lifelong silent presence of the man next door. This wasn't just about a lie. This was about a whole other life that had been erased, and I was about to write it back into existence. The day we collected the samples was a masterclass in silent warfare. We gathered in the formal living room, the 5 test kits laid out on the coffee table like instruments for a surgery. No one spoke. The only sounds were the rustle of plastic packaging and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I watched as each of them swabbed the inside of their cheek, Regina with a flourish of defiance, Kenneth with a grim mechanical motion, and Louise with the resigned air of a man walking to his own execution. I sealed each sample bag myself, the plastic crinkling under my fingers, and placed them in the prepaid mailer. The blood, so to speak, was in the ink. Later that evening, Louise found me in the library. He closed the heavy oak doors behind him, shutting out the rest of the house. "Are you happy now?" he asked, his voice low and strained. He wouldn't look at me, instead focusing on a row of leather-bound books. "Was this worth it, tearing everything apart just to humiliate my mother?" "Your mother accused me of infidelity in front of 30 people, I reminded him calmly. "She questioned the legitimacy of our daughter. This is not a game I started, Luis. I'm just playing the hand I was dealt." "You could have just said no." "You could have let it go." "And let her win?" I finally asked, my voice dropping. "Let her plant that seed of doubt in everyone's mind, including yours. Is that what you wanted?" He had no answer for that. He just stood there, a man caught between two warring countries belonging to neither. I didn't tell him that his mother's humiliation was merely collateral damage, a bonus, not the objective. With the samples mailed off, a tense 2-week waiting period began. I used the time to make one last trip to the attic. I felt like a detective returning to the scene of the crime, searching for the one clue everyone else had missed. I went through a trunk of Regina's things from college, old textbooks, faded sorority shirts, and a small locked wooden box. It wasn't hard to pick the cheap lock. Inside, nestled amongst dried corsages and ticket stubs, was a stack of letters. Most were from friends, but a handful were different. They were drafts, written in Regina's elegant cursive, full of crossed-out words and tear stains that had warped the paper. They were all addressed to Wyatt. The last one, dated just 2 months before her wedding to Kenneth, was the one that stopped my breath. "Wyatt," it began. "I don't know how to say this. My parents know. They found out everything. They say I've brought shame on this family and that there is only one way to fix it. They have arranged for me to marry Kenneth Delgado. He knows, and he has agreed to raise the child as his own. They are taking me out of school. They say I can never see you again. Please don't try to contact me. They'll only make it worse. I'm so sorry. I will love you forever, but I have to do this for our baby." It was all there. A forced marriage, a secret pregnancy, a lifetime of lies, all spelled out on faded stationery. I folded the letter carefully, my hands steady, despite the tremor in my chest. This was the motive. The DNA would be the weapon. That night, Quinn called. "Okay, you are not going to believe this," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "So, Wyatt Gardner doesn't have a public profile on any of the big DNA sites. He's a ghost, but his second cousin on his mother's side does. I found her through a genealogy forum. She's super into family history and has her results public to find relatives." "And?" I asked, my heart pounding, and I ran the markers. Using the public data from his cousin, you can trace certain unique genetic sequences that are passed down through that specific family line. It's not 100% definitive without a direct sample from Wyatt, but Angie, the probability that Luis shares those same rare markers is astronomical. We're talking statistically impossible for it to be a coincidence. He's a Gardner, not a Delgado. The pieces were no longer just clicking into place, they were welded together. 2 weeks after we sent the kits, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with a California area code. "Hello, may I speak with Angela Delgado?" a professional, serious voice asked. "This is she. My name is Dr. Evans. I'm the lab director for the genetic testing facility. I'm calling about the results for the samples submitted under your name." He paused. "We've flagged some significant inconsistencies in the results that we need to discuss with you before we can release the official report. Would you be available to come in and speak with me in person?" The lab was a sterile, white-walled office 20 miles from the suffocating perfection of the Delgado estate. I sat across a sleek metal desk from Dr. Evans, a man with tired eyes and an impeccably calm demeanour. He slid a folder across the desk towards me. "As the primary contact on the account, we are obligated to discuss these findings with you first," he said, his voice neutral. "Typically, results are straightforward. In this case, they are not. I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap, my expression carefully composed. I see. He opened the folder, revealing 2 separate reports. Let's start with the simple one, the paternity test for Isabella Delgado. The results are conclusive. The probability of paternity for Luis Delgado is 99.9999%. He is, without any scientific doubt, her biological father. I nodded slowly, letting out a small measured breath. Vindication. It felt less like a victory and more like the cold click of a lock falling into place. And the other results? Dr. Evans slid the second report forward. This is where the inconsistency arises. As part of the family analysis, we compared the DNA of all participants. Based on the samples provided, Luis Delgado and Kenneth Delgado do not share the necessary allelic markers to indicate a parent-child relationship. They are not biologically related. There it was. The truth, printed in black and white, stripped of all emotion and distilled into pure data. I had known it, deep in my bones, for months, but seeing it confirmed on official letterhead sent a chill through me. I was armed now. The war was about to begin. "Thank you, Doctor," I said, my voice even. "I appreciate your discretion. Please hold the official release of the reports. I will let you know when to send them." He looked at me, a flicker of something, pity perhaps, in his eyes. "Of course. This is sensitive information." That evening, at a family dinner that felt more like a wake, I put on the performance of my life. I picked at my food, my gaze fixed on my plate. I let my shoulders slump. When Luis tried to make small talk, I gave him a weak, distracted smile. I was the very picture of a woman consumed by anxiety. Regina watched me from across the table, a vulture circling its prey. She was enjoying this far too much. "You look pale, dear," she said, her voice laced with false concern. "Stressing over those silly tests, are we? I'm sure it will all be fine." "I just want this to be over," I murmured, looking up with what I hoped were convincingly worried eyes. "The waiting is awful." "Well, it shouldn't be much longer," she announced, placing her wine glass down with a decisive click. She saw her opening and seized it. "I think, to put an end to all this nonsense, we should open the results together. As a family, this Sunday, we'll have brunch, read the papers and move on as a united front." Kenneth's fork clattered against his plate. Luis just stared at his mother, his expression unreadable. "That sounds fair," I said, my voice barely a whisper. It was perfect. She thought this was her stage, her moment of triumph where she would either expose me or magnify my humiliation before graciously forgiving me. Later that night, as I was taking the recycling bin to the curb, a figure emerged from the shadows of the driveway next door. It was Wyatt Gardner. He was holding a gardening tool, but he wasn't gardening. He was just standing there, watching my house. He walked towards me slowly, stopping at the edge of his lawn. "Angela," he said, his voice rough, I heard about what's going on. The tests." The neighbourhood was small. Gossip travelled fast. "It's a family matter, Wyatt," I said politely. He looked down at the ground, then back up at me, his eyes filled with a sorrow so old it seemed etched into his face. "Sometimes," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "people make choices when they're young, choices they're forced into, and they have to live with them forever. Sometimes a man can have a child out there and never be allowed to know him." He was confessing, not to me, but to the universe, to the decades of silence. He was hoping for a reaction, for absolution, for something. I gave him nothing. I just looked at him, held his gaze for a long moment, and let a small, knowing smile touch my lips. Then I turned and walked back inside, leaving him alone in the dark. Sunday brunch at the Delgado estate was a sacred ritual. Normally, it was a lavish affair with mimosas and carefully curated conversation. Today, it was a tribunal. A platter of untouched croissants sat in the centre of the dining table. The only liquid being poured was ice water. Regina was at the head of the table, radiating a smug, regal authority. Kenneth sat to her right, a statue carved from granite. Luis was beside me, fidgeting with his napkin, his anxiety a palpable hum in the air. I, for my part, kept my hands clasped in my lap, feigning a nervousness I did not feel. Just as Regina was about to speak, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, standing up. A moment later, I returned with Wyatt Gardner in tow. He looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room, landing on everyone but Regina. "Wyatt?" Luis asked, confused. "What are you doing here?" "I asked him to join us," I said calmly, returning to my seat. "Since this is about family transparency, I thought it was important for a lifelong family friend to be present." Regina's eyes narrowed. She shot a venomous look at Wyatt, who refused to meet her gaze. The trap was now fully set. "Fine," Regina snapped, turning her attention back to me. "Let's get on with this farce. Where are the results?" I placed a simple manila folder on the table. "The lab emailed the official reports this morning. I printed copies for everyone." I slid 4 sealed envelopes across the polished wood. One for Regina, one for Kenneth, one for Luis, and one for me. "Let's start with the reason we're all here, shall we?" I said, my voice clear and steady. I opened my envelope and pulled out the first page. "This is the paternity analysis for Isabella Delgado." I looked directly at Regina, whose smirk was unwavering. She thought she knew what was coming. "It reads, the alleged father, Luis Delgado, is not excluded as the biological father of the child, Isabella Delgado. The probability of paternity is 99.9999%. I placed the paper down flat on the table. Isabella is Luis's daughter. The silence was absolute. Regina's face went slack, her smugness evaporating into stunned disbelief. Luis let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks, a wave of pure relief washing over him. He reached for my hand under the table, but I didn't take it. We weren't done. "Well," I said into the quiet. "That settles that. But as I said at the party, this was about full transparency. And the family analysis report raised a few other interesting points." I pulled a second sheet of paper from my envelope. "This one compares the DNA between Luis and Kenneth." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "According to this report, they share no biological link. Luis, you are not Kenneth's son." Every head whipped towards Regina. Her face, which had been pale with shock, was now ashen. Kenneth didn't flinch. He just stared at his wife, his expression one of profound, weary disappointment. He had known all along. "That's a lie!" Regina shrieked, finding her voice. "You faked it! You forged these documents to destroy me!" "Did I?" I asked softly. I reached into my folder again and pulled out a photocopy of a faded, handwritten letter. I slid it across the table to Luis. "I found this in your mother's memory box in the attic. It's a letter she wrote to Wyatt, dated 2 months before she married Kenneth." Luis picked it up, his hands trembling as he read. I watched his face crumble as he absorbed the words. "She writes," I recited from memory, my voice devoid of emotion. "He knows, and he has agreed to raise the child as his own. I have to do this, for our baby." "You venomous little snake," Regina hissed, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "The lab only tells you who isn't a match," I continued, ignoring her. "But with a little research, it's not hard to find who is." I pulled out the final document from my folder. It was the report Quinn had helped me compile, showing the undeniable genetic markers linking Luis's DNA to Wyatt's family line. I placed it on the table. "This is a familial match report, cross-referenced from public genealogy databases. It shows a statistical certainty that Luis shares his paternal lineage not with the Delgados." I looked up, my eyes locking with Wyatt's for the first time. But with the gardener's. The room imploded. Louis stared at the paper, then at Wyatt, then at the woman he had called his mother his entire life. The betrayal, the confusion, the sheer magnitude of the lie twisted his face into a mask of agony. "You," he whispered, his voice choked. He stood up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. He pointed a shaking finger at Regina, his whole body trembling. "You lied to me! My entire life is a lie!" he roared, his voice finally breaking free in a wave of pure, unrestrained fury. The explosion of Luis's voice shattered the last remnants of the Delgado family's pristine facade. Chaos erupted. Regina stumbled to her feet, her hands outstretched towards her son. "Luis, please, let me explain. It wasn't like that." "Not like what?" he yelled, his face contorted with a pain so raw it was difficult to watch. "You lied to me every single day for 34 years. You let me believe I was someone I'm not." Kenneth finally moved. He rose slowly from his chair, his movements heavy with a resignation that spoke of decades of silent compliance. He walked over to Regina, his expression unreadable. "Was it worth it, Regina?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a collapsing mountain. "All this? Was any of it worth this?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out of the dining room, out of the house, and out of the life he had so carefully constructed. Wyatt sat frozen in his chair, a man caught in the wreckage of a past he was never allowed to claim. He looked at Luis, his eyes filled with a lifetime of unspoken longing and regret. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? Regina finally broke. The iron mask of her pride shattered, and she crumpled, sobbing. "My family," she choked out, her words tumbling over each other in a desperate last-ditch confession. "My parents were very powerful, very proud. They said I had ruined my life, that I would bring shame on them. They made the arrangements. Kenneth's family needed a business merger. My family needed to hide a scandal. It was a transaction." She looked at Luis, her eyes pleading. "They made me promise to never speak of it again, to never see Wyatt again. Dave Walker drew up the legal agreements. He was the only other one who knew. I did it to protect you, Luis. To give you a good life, a name." "A name?" Luis laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You gave me a lie. You didn't protect me. You protected yourself." He turned his back on her, his shoulders heaving. Regina reached for him, but he flinched away as if her touch were acid. Defeated, she sank back into her chair, a queen dethroned in her own castle, weeping amongst the ruins. Throughout it all, I said nothing. I just sat there, a silent observer at the demolition I had engineered. My heart wasn't pounding. I felt no thrill of victory, no savage joy, just a cold, hollow emptiness. The revenge was complete. The truth was out. And it was every bit as devastating as I had imagined. Slowly, Luis turned his head and looked at me. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrifying clarity. The pieces were connecting for him now. My calm demeanour at the party, my insistence on a family-wide test, my conversation with Dave, my inviting Wyatt here today. He saw the intricate web I had woven. "You knew," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You've known for weeks, haven't you?" I didn't deny it. I met his gaze and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time since this all began. He saw not the wronged wife, but the architect of his family's destruction. The shock on his face curdled into a new kind of betrayal, one that was colder and deeper than his mother's lies. "This was all planned," he said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Every step. You set her up. You set us all up." He took a step towards me, his voice dropping to a raw, wounded whisper that cut me more than his shouting ever could. Was this really about our daughter, Angela? Was any of this about protecting Isabella? Or was this just about you proving a point? Louise's question hung in the ruined atmosphere of the dining room, a final devastating blow. He wasn't looking for an answer. He was delivering a verdict. The hours that followed were a blur of quiet, devastating departures. Kenneth returned only to pack a single suitcase, his face a mask of grim resolve. He didn't speak to Regina. He didn't even look at her. He simply walked out the door, and we all knew he wasn't coming back. Regina, stripped of her husband, her son, and her dignity, was gone by nightfall, collected by a bewildered-looking friend. Wyatt vanished sometime during the initial chaos, a ghost returning to his haunting. Louise and I were left alone in the cavernous, silent house. He didn't yell or argue. He just looked at me with the eyes of a stranger. "I'm going to a hotel," he said, his voice flat and empty. "I need space." He packed a bag and left, the click of the front door echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. I learned that week that power doesn't come from yelling. It doesn't come from throwing things or making threats. Real power is in the calm, calculated delivery of a truth so undeniable it shatters the world of the person who hears it. I had wielded that power, and now I was the queen of a silent, empty kingdom. A few days later, I was having coffee with Violet in my kitchen. The house felt too big, the silence too loud. "Kenneth filed for divorce," I told her, tracing the rim of my mug. "Louise started seeing a therapist. He calls to check on Isabella, but he won't talk to me about anything else." Violet watched me, her expression a mixture of support and deep concern. "You got what you wanted, Angie," she said softly. "You exposed her. You were vindicated. Are you happy?" I considered the question. Was I happy? "Happy isn't the right word," I said. "I feel level. The board has been cleared. The lies are gone." "But what's left?" she pressed gently. "You seem harder. Like you built a fortress around yourself, and now you can't find the door out." She was right. The fire of my anger had burned so brightly it had forged something new inside me, something colder and stronger, and I wasn't sure I liked it. I wondered if revenge had made me hollow. The year that followed was one of quiet dismantling. Lawyers came and went. The house was put up for sale. Louise and I began the slow, painful process of separating our lives, communicating only through brief, sterile text messages about Isabella. Isabella's second birthday arrived on a cool, overcast afternoon. The party was nothing like the year before. There was no sprawling estate, no dozens of guests. It was just me, my sister Quinn, and Violet in my small new apartment. We had a simple store-bought cake with 2 candles on it. Just as I was about to light them, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Luis. He looked tired, but healthier than he had a year ago. He held a clumsily wrapped gift in his hands. "I didn't want to miss it," he said, his eyes on our daughter, who was clapping her hands excitedly at the sight of the cake. He stayed for an hour. The conversation was stilted, but it wasn't hostile. It was the careful, polite talk of 2 people who had once shared a life and were now navigating a fragile truce. As he was leaving, another knock came. It was Wyatt. He didn't try to come in. He just stood in the hallway, holding a thick envelope. "This is for Louise," he said, his voice quiet. "It's not an excuse. It's just the truth, my side of it. He can read it or throw it away. It's his choice." He handed it to me and left. I passed the letter to Louise. He took it, his expression unreadable, and left without another word. That night, after Isabella was asleep, I stood by my window looking out at the city lights. Some secrets rot the people who keep them, and some truths. They burn the whole house down. I had stood in the ashes, and I was still standing. I didn't ruin this family. Their lies did. I just turned on the lights.
I found the sticky note before I found my pasta pot. Fixed your system. T. My name is Alexandra. I'm 31. I work the evening front desk at a neighbourhood urgent care, and I got home at 11:48 p.m. to a kitchen that didn't belong to me anymore. My husband Dan is 33. We bought this little blue bungalow on a tree-lined street last August, and we've been married 4 years. His mum, Teresa, 62, lives 15 minutes away. His older sister, Rachel, is 35. Her husband, Abel, is 36. Our next-door neighbour, Luna, is 29, and notices things without making a big deal out of it. Those are the people who end up mattering in this story. I hung my keys on the hook and just stood there. The pantry shelves looked like they'd been auditioning for a magazine. Pasta in one row, rice in another, baking on top. But it wasn't my order. The big Dutch oven that usually lives on the front left burner was gone. The dish towels were folded different, tight little squares instead of my lazy thirds. The coffee mugs were switched to the cabinet over the stove, which is the one place they collect grease. On the fridge, the magnet with our lawn service number had been moved to a grid with Essentials scrawled over it in block letters, like a teacher making a chart. The sticky note was stuck to the inside of the upper cabinet. Fixed your system. Tea. I said nope out loud to an empty room. Dan was already in bed. I could hear his sleep-slow breathing down the hall. I didn't want to wake him, so I tried to reverse engineer the kitchen quietly. That lasted for about 2 minutes, until I opened the junk drawer and found everything in labelled baggies: batteries, rubber bands, paper clips. Somebody, not me, had used masking tape and a Sharpie on the inside of the drawer. Miscellaneous, underlined twice. I checked the counter. Our mail, the stack I dumped there before work, was opened and restacked upside down. The water bill flap was torn clean, like someone had used a letter opener. My name was on the envelopes. My chest went hot and then hollow. I texted Dan from 3 rooms away because whispering through the door felt childish. Me. Did your mom come by? He didn't answer. I could have stomped in. Instead, I started hunting the pasta pot because I was starving, and I had exactly enough energy for boiling water and red sauce from a jar. 40 minutes. That's how long it took to find it, squatting on a step stool and tracing the logic of someone who thought ladles belong with grilling tongs and the pot belongs on the top shelf behind the cake stand I use twice a year. I kept my breathing quiet, the way you do when you're holding it together by using your hands. I put water on. I checked the thermostat because my fingers felt cold. It was set to a schedule I didn't recognise, little dots and a low temperature on a graph I never programmed. I nudged it back up. My phone buzzed. A single bubble. Dan. She swung by to drop off soup. That's just how Mum shows love. Be grateful. She means well. I stared at the words until they blurred, shut my eyes, and counted to 10. When I went into the bedroom, Dan shifted and blinked. Hey, he said, voice thick. You good? Your mum was here, I said. She probably organised, he mumbled, already halfway under. She does that for everyone. He yawned. It's a love language. My name was on the mail, I said. I kept my voice level. It was opened. Babe, she doesn't mean anything by it, he said, the line he always uses when he thinks, if we don't make it a problem, it won't be one. Can we talk in the morning? I let him have that because I didn't trust the shape of my words right then. He reached for my hand and missed. He was asleep in seconds. I simmered sauce and ate standing up at the counter, the fork clicking against the bowl in a quiet house that no longer felt fully mine. It's not the big betrayals. Not for me. It's the hours, the 40 minutes I will not get back, alone in a kitchen that should fit my hands. I took the trash out because the sauce jar had that lingering garlic smell I hate in the morning. The night air had a clean bite. Our deck light, the one Dan insists we turn off to save the planet a little, clicked on with the motion. I lifted the bin lid and tossed the bag in, then turned to go back inside. The grill sat in its usual spot, cover pulled down, big black dome shining dull in the porch light. We keep our spare key there, inside a little magnetic box tucked under the lid. Everyone in this neighbourhood hides a key somewhere. It's not special. What made me pause was how the grill lid sat, not flush, as if someone had set it down quick and didn't check the edge. It wasn't open enough to be obvious. If you weren't looking, you wouldn't see it. I stood and looked anyway. The lid made a soft, out-of-true shadow on the deck boards. My stomach drew tight. I didn't lift it then. I told myself it was late, that I was being dramatic, that I'd check in the morning with coffee and light and a steady hand. Inside, I washed the one bowl, put it in the rack where I always do, and set the dry towel back on the oven handle. Then I went to bed and stared at the ceiling, the words on that sticky note glowing behind my eyelids, like a sign I hadn't agreed to. Morning made everything look normal until I lifted the grill lid. I took my coffee onto the deck because I'd promised myself I'd check in the light. The boards were damp, and the air had that thin chill that smells like wet wood. The grill sat where it always sits, cover down, a faint smear of grease on the handle from last weekend. I cracked the lid and slid my fingers to the underside where the little magnetic box lives. Empty. The magnet was there. The box snapped open, but the slot where the key should be was just black plastic. No glint of brass, no spare. My stomach dipped. I set my mug on the rail and texted Dan. Me. Did you take the spare key? He was already up. His reply came while I was still staring at the empty box. Dan. I must have forgotten to put it back. Me. Put what back? The grill key is gone. 3 dots, they came and went twice. Dan. Okay. Mom might have borrowed it when she stopped by. She said something about the fern looking thirsty. I'll get it back today. Me. She borrowed our house key? Dan. It's just the spare. I'll call her. Not a big deal. I took a breath and let it out slowly. The way the triage nurse at work teaches patients when their hearts feel fast. I carried my coffee inside and set it on the counter next to the stack of mail I'd put back in some kind of order last night. The torn water bill sat on top, the flap cleanly sliced. I slid my finger under it and made myself read the date like I was some kind of responsible adult and not the person whose mother-in-law had rearranged the towels. My phone buzzed again, different tone. Teresa. A photo filled the screen. Our junk drawer, the one by the fridge, and I knew it was ours because of the scuffed bottle opener and the red flashlight. Everything was nested in little trays with labels, batteries, rubber bands, pens, paper clips. The masking tape label I'd seen, miscellaneous, was now 3 separate tags, all straight as a ruler. You're welcome, she wrote, followed by a row of little tag emojis and a smiley with hearts. I stared at the photo for 3 seconds, then typed what I meant. Me. Please don't come in when we're not home. Dots. Then, Teresa. Of course, sweetie. Just trying to help. Another photo arrived before I could answer. Our bills, gathered from wherever she'd found them last night, rubber-banded into neat little bundles. Electric, water, internet. She'd written the words on sticky flags and stuck them like tabs. Streamlined so you don't miss anything, her text said. I set the phone down on the counter and pulled the actual stack toward me. Water? Check. Internet? Check. Trash pickup reminder? Check. I looked for the electric bill flag I'd just seen in her photo and felt the empty spot where it should have been in the pile, like someone had taken a piece out of my brain. I flipped the stack over, then back, then checked the floor in case it had slipped. Nothing. Me. Where is the electric bill? I deleted it before sending. A question was an invitation to a conversation I didn't want to have over text. I checked the mail tray by the door. I checked between the cookbooks because that's where Dan sometimes tucks things he doesn't want to look at. I checked the recycling, which I hadn't taken out yet. Catalogues, grocery circulars, no bill. Dan again. Dan. I talked to her. She said she was trying to make it easier. She has the spare. She'll return it. Me. Did she take a bill? Dan. She said she just grouped them. Maybe you moved it when you were sorting. I looked at the spotless little essentials grid on my fridge and had to laugh once, a sharp little bark that wasn't humour. Me. I didn't move it. There was a pause long enough for me to rinse my coffee mug and decide to look one more place. I pulled open the junk drawer, the one from the photo, because maybe she'd tucked it there logically under her new system. Pens, rubber bands, batteries, no paper. The masking tape labels looked back at me like they were certain. Teresa again. Teresa. I'll stay out of your hair, dear. I only want to support you. Busy day. Kisses. The of course and the kisses landed with the photo of my life sorted into piles I hadn't asked for. I could hear my own voice from last night. Please don't come in when we're not home. I had said the thing out loud. It should have been simple. I went room to room with the stack, just to be sure I wasn't missing the obvious. The office corner by the window where we keep the laptop. The basket by the couch where we throw things when company comes. Nothing. I opened the cabinet where the pasta lives again now because I put it back, and stood there for a second just to feel like I could control one small square of my house. Me to Dan. Electric bill is missing. Dan. I'll swing by Mum's at lunch and ask. I'm sure it's here somewhere. Don't stress. I put the mail back down and pressed my palm flat on the counter until the feeling passed. The house looked fine in daylight. My towel hung like I left it. The magnets were in my order. Somewhere, a key I hadn't given permission for was in someone else's pocket, and a bill we needed to pay had vanished into a system I didn't agree to. I checked the grill one more time, like the key might have reappeared just because I wanted it to. The box was still empty. The lid settled perfectly this time, flush with the edge. By late afternoon, Dan still hadn't brought the spare back. Dan. Swung by at lunch. She wasn't home. I'll grab it after work. Me. Please do. I slid my badge into my pocket and stepped onto the porch. Luna was at her mailbox in a hoodie and flip-flops, hair up with a pencil through it. She lifted her chin at me. Hey, you got a sec? Yeah, I said, locking the door that no longer felt like it locked. She walked closer, low voice like she was telling me a secret I might not want. I saw Teresa earlier, around noon. She had your watering can. I waved, but she didn't see me. I could see her through your window, watering the fern. Sorry I didn't text. I wasn't sure if it was a thing. It's a thing, I said. My smile felt tight. Thanks for telling me. I'll keep an eye out, she said. She hesitated. You okay? I will be, I said. I have to go clock in. On my break at 7:20, I sat on a plastic chair behind the urgent care and dialed Teresa. She picked up on the second ring, voice sunny. Hi, dear. Teresa, did you come by today? I kept it even. Just to water that poor fern. It was gasping. You two are so busy. She laughed. I borrowed the spare like we do in this family access. Please don't come in when we're not home, I said. I meant what I texted. Oh, sweetheart, a little sigh. You're being sensitive. I'm not rifling through your underwear. I'm keeping your home tidy and hydrated. The way she said your sounded like a correction. You opened our mail, I said. The electric bill is missing. I grouped them, she said, and I could hear the smile. You'll thank me when you're not losing things. I know where my things are, I said. I need the spare key back, and I need you to stop coming in without us here. A beat of silence. When she spoke again, her voice dropped into that soft, patient register she uses when she's winning. I'm just preparing your home for how you'll want it, dear. Systems make life easier. You'll see when you have kids. We don't have kids, I said. Bring the key back, please. I'll pop by tomorrow, she said briskly, as if I'd ordered curtains. Kisses. The line clicked. I stared at my phone until my break was over. When I got home at 11:52, the house met me with a slap of cold air. I rubbed my arms and went straight to the thermostat. The screen glowed with a graph, a little dot plunging at 9 p.m. like a ski slope. Hold ended, it read. Schedule resumed. I touched it up a few degrees and felt the vents cough to life. The fern looked fine. I stood in the kitchen with my coat still on and checked the counter for anything new. The mail stack sat like a dare. I rinsed my travel mug and wiped a dry ring the bottom left on the island. My phone buzzed. Subject: payment past due. From the electric company. Balance now includes a $25 late fee. My chest tightened. I yanked open the junk drawer, pulled out the little trays Teresa had wedged in there, and set them on the counter one by one. Pens, rubber bands, batteries, a tape measure. The last divider had a taped label that said, MISC. I pried the divider up, and there it was, slid underneath like a shim. The electric bill opened, the top corner folded sharp as an arrow. I laid it flat. Amount due included an extra line. Late fee 25s. Due date was last week. We're not usually late. We auto-pay a lot of things. But Dan insists on paper for utilities because he likes to see the numbers. I could hear him saying it. I carried the bill into the bedroom. Dan rolled over, one eye open, hair smashed flat on one side. Hey, you okay? She came in today, I said. Luna saw her. The house was freezing when I got home. The electric bill was under the drawer organizer labelled MISC. We got a late fee. He blinked hard, processing. Babe, I tried to get the key. She wasn't home. You told me that. I held up the bill. This cost us money. It's not just towels and labels. He sat up a little, rubbed his face. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, I'll talk to her again. Or, he swallowed. Maybe we should invite them over. Sunday, dinner. We can, I don't know, smooth this out with everyone there. Lay it out. Neutral ground. It landed like a piece of furniture no one had measured. A family dinner to tell your mum to stop breaking in. It's not breaking in, he said reflexively, then winced. I mean, you know what I mean. If Rachel's there, Mum might actually hear it, and it won't be just you and her. I looked at the bill again, the neat font of the late fee line. I thought about Teresa's patient voice, the way she had already moved on to tomorrow. Fine, I said. Sunday. He reached for my hand. We'll fix it. I didn't answer. The heat finally reached the bedroom, a soft whoosh through the vent. It didn't touch the cold place in my chest. Saturday, I made coffee and put the electric bill on the counter where Dan would see it. He came out in sweats, rubbing his eyes. I need you to tell your mum to stop coming in when we're not here, I said. No more spare key. No family access. He looked at the bill, winced. I'll handle it. I'm having lunch with her anyway. I'll bring it up. Bring the key back, I said. He nodded. I will. He kissed my cheek and left with his gym bag and a promise that felt light in the air. I cleaned the counter like a person with a small square of control, then sat on the step and tied my sneakers for a quick walk before my shift. The grill lid sat flush, neat as a lie. Around 1, my phone buzzed. Dan, with Mum, talking. 10 minutes later. Dan, she didn't mean it like that. You know how she is. She says she was just trying to help. Family looks out for each other. I stared at the words. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. Me. Family also asks, did you get the key? Dan. She said she returned it. She thought the fern looked bad and adjusted the thermostat schedule because it's more efficient. She says she'll text next time. Me. There isn't a next time. Please tell her that. The key needs to stay with us. Dan. I'll tell her again. Let's just save the rest for tomorrow. Dinner will make it easier. My throat felt tight. I sent a thumbs up because I didn't have a neutral sentence available. At 2, Rachel texted the family thread. Farmer's market by the church. Come say hi. I'm by the honey guy. I was dressed for work. Dan texted me separately. 5 minutes? They're there. Able to. I can meet you. Neutral ground. I went because not going would be a different argument. The market smelled like kettle corn and cut basil. Rachel wore sunglasses and a straw hat like she was born for stalls and samples. Abel stood beside her, hands in his pockets, a paper bag looped over his wrist. There she is, Rachel said, leaning in for a quick hug. How's the pantry? Mum said she rescued it. It was crying for help. She laughed and popped a grape tomato in her mouth. Just kidding. Kind of. Dan shot me a look that said, "Please don't light this on fire." Abel offered me a small smile, the kind that says he's watching and not adding kindling. "I like my pantry the way I set it up," I said. My voice was even. "And my mail closed." Rachel's eyebrows lifted. "She opened your mail? Mum." She said it like a sitcom. "She used to do that at mine. Drove me crazy for like a week. And then I realised it's kind of nice. I don't have to think." "I like thinking," I said. Teresa wasn't there, which made everything looser and also more frustrating. People streamed past with bouquets and coffee. Someone's toddler dropped a blueberry and burst into tears. Dan touched my elbow. "We'll talk tomorrow," he murmured. Rachel rolled her eyes like tomorrow was a production. "If this is about rules, maybe just, I don't know, text them. Mum loves a list. You know how she is." She took Abel's bag and peered inside. "Did you get the big peaches?" "I got the big peaches," he said. I glanced at the time and tapped Dan's arm. "I have to clock in." He walked me to the curb. "She said she'll text," he said again, as if repetition could make it true. "She thinks the grill key is convenient if she needs to drop soup." "It's convenient for her," I said. "It's not safe for me." He nodded. The smallest concession. "We'll fix it tomorrow." I did my shift, checked and sprained ankles, printed wristbands, smiled at a feverish toddler who threw a sticker at my desk. On my break, I scrolled my phone with one hand and ate almonds with the other. No new texts from Teresa, none from Dan. It was full dusk when I got home. The porch light clicked on with my motion. I set my bag on the bench and lifted the grill lid because I needed a fact. The magnetic box was there. I popped it open. The brass winked back at me like nothing had ever happened, like my stomach hadn't been in a knot for 2 days. The key was a little grease smudged along the top, like someone had handled it with hamburger hands and wiped it on a paper towel. I slid it out, held it up in the porch light. Dan came up behind me, keys jangling. "It's back," I said. He exhaled. "See? She heard you." "No," I said. I set the spare in my palm and closed my fist around it. "This ends now." His face changed. Not angry, not yet, but tighter, like he was bracing. "Let's just make it through dinner," he said. "We'll set whatever we need to set." I closed the grill, put the magnetic box back exactly where it goes, and went inside. I set the spare on the counter next to the electric bill, a little still life of what needed fixing. My phone buzzed. A photo filled the screen. Under our kitchen sink, everything in a straight parade, sprays lined up by height, sponges in a little caddy, extra paper towels stacked like a store display. Each bottle had a strip of masking tape with its name in neat block letters. Degreaser, glass, multi-surface. I tackled under-sink clutter this morning. "You're welcome." I felt the words hit the air between me and Dan. He looked at the screen, then at me. "Tomorrow," he said, barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow," I said. And then, because I needed to hear myself say something solid out loud, "And no more keys." Sunday morning, I opened the cabinet under the sink, and the smell of plastic hit me. The sprays were lined up by brand, labels facing forward, sponges stacked like poker chips. Strips of masking tape announced what everything was, as if the actual labels weren't enough. Degreaser, glass, multi-surface. The little caddy had sponges written on it, neat block letters. It looked like a store display. It didn't look like my house. I closed the cabinet and grabbed my keys. "Where are you going?" Dan called from the bedroom. "Hardware store," I said. "Back in an hour." He came to the hallway, hair a mess, t-shirt inside out. "We're doing this now?" "The spare is back," I said, nodding toward the counter where I'd left it next to the electric bill. "But that doesn't mean this doesn't happen again. I want a keypad." "No more hiding keys in the grill." He rubbed his eyes. "We should have talked." "We've been talking," I said. "You said dinner would make it easier. A locked door will make it clearer." The store was quiet. That Sunday morning lull where the only people there are retirees in cargo vests and one teenager getting paid to face shelves. I stood too long in the lock aisle, fingers tracing plastic clamshell packages. The keypad deadbolt I picked had big buttons you could hit with your thumb and a simple manual, the kind with pictures. I matched it with a new handle set so the finish wouldn't clash. The total was $129 with tax. My palms were slick, signing the screen. Back home, I set the box on the entry bench and took a breath. The front door is original to the house. The wood is a little soft around the screw holes, and I didn't want to strip anything. I laid out the parts on a towel like I was prepping for surgery. Old deadbolt out first. 2 long screws, faceplate off, guts slid from the edge of the door with a little wiggle. New latch in, strike plate lined up, 2 short screws. I moved slowly, counting, not forcing. Luna's screen door squeaked next door. "You renovating or robbing yourself?" she called lightly. "Upgrading," I said, holding the new keypad up so she could see. She came over in slip-on sneakers, peered at the towel. "Nice." "Want me to hold the door?" "Yes, please." I lowered my shoulder against the door so it didn't fall forward on the hinges, while I threaded the cable from the keypad through the hole. "We're done hiding keys in the grill." Luna's mouth did a quick, sympathetic line. "Good." We worked in companionable silence. I fed the tailpiece through the latch, lined up the interior plate, and tightened everything by hand before I used the screwdriver so I wouldn't over-tighten and split something. Luna braced the edge when I needed to push. The house was quiet in that way that makes every screw turn sound loud. "You okay?" she asked when I had to stop and shake out my hand. "I will be," I said. "We're going to have them over. Soon. Lay this out." "I can be home," she said. "If you need anything. Or if you need to show up on my porch for 5 minutes." I smiled at that. "Thanks." Dan walked in halfway through the handle set swap. Paper cups of coffee in a carrier. He stopped when he saw the door open and the guts of it on my towel. "We should have talked," he said again, automatic. "We've been talking," I said without looking up. "This is me listening to myself." He set the coffee on the console and watched my hands. After a second, he squeezed the bridge of his nose and nodded, slow and pale. "Okay." The last screws went in flush. I slid the battery into the interior unit, snapped the cover on, and hit the program button. The keypad lit up soft blue. I entered a code I could remember without writing it down, the kind of number that lives in your head already, and the bolt threw itself with a clean mechanical chunk. I tried the knob. Solid. I unlocked and relocked it again, just to hear the sound. "Your turn," I said to Dan, handing him the code. He punched it and the mechanism whirred. It felt like a line drawing itself at the threshold. We moved to the back door. I didn't buy a second keypad. For now, a matching key deadbolt would do. I swapped it out fast, using the momentum from the front. When I tightened the last screw, I leaned my forehead against the cool wood for 2 breaths. Dan held out a coffee. "Truce latte." I took it. "We're not fighting." He nodded. "I'll back you?" He looked like he meant it, and also like it cost him something to say. Inside, I gathered the old deadbolt and the spare key from the counter. The key felt heavier than it should. I opened the junk drawer that now had tidy little labelled trays and slipped a small blank envelope from the stack where we keep stamps. I slid the spare inside and left the flap open. I didn't seal it yet, not until I wrote what needed to go with it. I tapped the envelope twice with my fingertip and closed the drawer. "Let's test it one more time," I said. We stepped onto the porch. Dan locked the door from the inside. I pulled it shut behind us. The keypad's blue light woke at my touch. I entered the code. Inside, the bolt withdrew with that same clean sound. He handed me the coffee back. "So, dinner?" "Text them," I said. "5 works. I'll make something I can make, even if everything goes sideways." He took out his phone, jaw set like he was about to lift something heavy. I took another sip and looked at our door. It looked the same as it always had. It just finally worked for us. I emptied a shoebox and started peeling. The masking tape came off in thin curls. Spices, snacks, misc, baking, even a bossy little arrow inside the junk drawer pointing to pens. I stacked the labels by type, rubber-banded them into neat little bundles like I was keeping exhibits for a hearing. Under the sink, I pulled the strips from the spray bottles and lined them on the counter. The plastic smell made my mouth taste like pennies. When I was done, the kitchen looked like my kitchen again. A little sloppy, a little alive. Dan wandered in, checked the time on the oven. "Need help?" "I've got it," I said. "I'm making something I could make half asleep." "Ziti?" he guessed, because he knows me. "Ziti." I boiled water and browned sausage in the shallow Dutch oven that belongs on the front left burner, because that's where it works best. I salted the pasta like I meant it, stirred in ricotta and jarred sauce and a handful of basil I clipped from the pot by the window. I grated a snowfall of mozzarella and slid the whole thing into the oven to melt into itself. Bagged salad into a bowl, garlic bread on a tray. If everything went sideways, the food would still be edible. While it baked, I sat at the island with an index card and a Sharpie. At the top, I wrote house rules. Then, in the same plain block letters Teresa favours, I numbered 1. Call or text before stopping by. 2. No entering when we're out. 3. Guest key for emergencies only. Underlined once. No speech, no sermon, just the facts. I pulled the little envelope from the junk drawer and set it open on the counter. The old brass spare from the grill went in first. A relic now, the new locks making it just a symbol. From the keypad box, I took one of the backup keys and slid it into a small manila tag I'd punched a hole in. I wrote in block letters, guest key for emergencies only. The tag dangled from the new key like a tiny sign. I added the index card. I didn't seal the envelope. I wanted the message to breathe. Dan read the card over my shoulder. He swallowed. "This is clear." "That's the point," I said. He nodded, something loosening in his face. "I'll back you." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "Mum, see you at 5. Rachel. We'll bring a pie. Abel wants to try that new place." "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. Dessert outsourced. Fewer variables. I wiped the counters, set 4 plates, 4 forks, 4 water glasses. I put the shoebox of labels on the sideboard, not to wield like a weapon, but so I could point if someone pretended not to understand scope. Luna's text popped up. A single thumbs up and a soup emoji, and then, "I'll be home if you need a second." I sent back a heart. At 4:30, the ziti came out bubbling in gold. I let it rest so it would cut clean. The house smelled like tomato and bread and the tiniest bit of courage. Dan hovered, checking his phone like it might tell him how to be 2 people at once. "Do you want me to say it?" he asked low. "Or do you want to?" "Both," I said. "You start, I'll finish." He nodded, relief and dread in one motion. I put the envelope on the table, edge aligned with a placemat. The tag on the guest key winked up at me. I could imagine Teresa's eyes catching on it. I hoped she'd see the kindness in it, not a shut door, a safer one. The keypad chirped when I tested it again, the bolt throwing and withdrawing with that clean sound I'd fallen a little in love with this morning. I half expected to see our old life tumble out when I opened the door, like a closet overstuffed with other people's systems. Instead, the entry held our shoes and my purse and nothing else. At 4:57, Dan poured water. At 4:58, he wiped an invisible spot on the table. At 4:59, I slid the garlic bread to a trivet and tucked a dish towel into the oven handle. At 5 o'clock sharp, metal scraped softly against the new deadbolt. It was a small sound, like a fork against a plate in another room, but it stopped the house. Dan and I looked at each other. In the half-second before anything else happened, I pictured the old brass teeth of a key trying a lock it once knew and finding the tumblers changed. I pictured the look she might have, not angry, just surprised that the world no longer arranged itself around her hand. I smoothed my palm over the envelope once, like you'd smooth a napkin, then walked to the door. The blue backlight of the keypad glowed like a quiet boundary. I took a breath, punched in our code, and turned the handle. Teresa stood on the porch with her hand still on the old brass key like a magician surprised her trick didn't land. Her eyes flicked to the keypad's blue glow, then to my face. I smiled the kind of smile you practice for customer service and family. "Hi," I said. "Come in." Behind her, Rachel and Abel were halfway up the walk, a white pie box balanced on Abel's forearm. Teresa stepped inside, tucking the useless key into her purse with a small, embarrassed movement. "New lock," she said, voice breezy but a half-step high. "Fancy." "We changed the locks," I said. It was time. Rachel kissed the air near my cheek. "We brought lemon meringue. Abel says the crust's legit." "Smells amazing in here," Abel added, eyes taking in the table, the ziti resting, the envelope set square. He clocked it and looked away, polite. We did coats and hellos. Teresa's attention drifted to the kitchen like muscle memory. I watched her look at the counter, the cabinet doors. Her hands stayed by her sides. "Water?" Dan said, already moving to pour. "Yes, please," Teresa said, smoothing the strap of her purse. We sat. I put the ziti on a trivet and the salad bowl in the middle. The envelope waited at Teresa's place, but I kept my hand on it for one more second, like you'd keep a dog from bolting. "Thanks for coming," Dan started, voice steady but quiet. He looked at his mother, then at his sister. "We wanted to clear up some things. We love seeing you. We want you here, but we need you to text or call before you come by. And we need you to not come in when we're not home." Teresa blinked. Her cheeks went pink. "I was dropping soup," she said softly. "I was watering the fern. "I know," Dan said, and it was the first time in days he didn't flinch from the sentence. "But it hasn't been working for us." I slid the envelope across the table to Teresa. The paper made a small sound on wood. "This will make it easier." She looked at it like it might be a test, then picked it up and eased the flap back. The index card sat on top. House rules, the 3 lines in plain black. Under it, the old brass spare from the grill glinted uselessly. Her mouth tightened at that. Then her fingers found the tagged key. Guest key for emergencies only. Her eyes snagged there. She read it twice. The flush climbed to her ears. Rachel put her elbow on the table and did a little exhale that was almost a laugh. "Isn't this a little formal?" Dan didn't look at her. "These are our rules," he said. I signed off. Something in the room shifted. Teresa's shoulders sank for a second, like a sail losing wind, then lifted again into place. She nodded once, small and measured. "Understood," she said. Her voice was thin but even. "Thank you," I said. "We want you to have the guest key. If we're here and you text, we'll open the door. If there's an actual emergency, use it. Otherwise, knock." Abel cleared his throat. "Ziti's going to congeal if we don't eat it," he said gently, and everyone let out a little breath. We served ourselves. Plates clinked. Dan asked Abel about the pie place. Rachel launched into a story about a farmer who tried to sell her artisan zucchini, and the table found surface chatter like a lifeline. Teresa ate quietly, eyes touching down on the cabinets and the stove, like she was orienting herself to a room she knew but didn't control. Halfway through, she set her fork down. "I adjusted your thermostat because you were wasting money," she said to the table, like a confession she needed to release. "I thought it would help." "The house was 49 degrees when I got home from work," I said, not unkindly. "We got a late fee on the electric. It didn't help." She looked at the envelope again, then at me. "All right," she said. "I hear you." Rachel swiped her finger through a bubble of cheese. "You could have just hashed this out on the family thread," she muttered. "You know, Mum loves lists." "This is the list," Dan said. We finished, and I brought plates to the sink. Teresa stood automatically, then glanced at me and dropped her hands uncertain. "You can sit," I said. "I've got it." She sat. The lemon meringue came out of its box in clean wedges. Abel complimented the crust. Rachel took pictures for her stories. Dan refilled waters and kissed my shoulder when no one was looking. When the last plates were stacked, Teresa lifted her eyes to mine. Careful now. Would you mind showing me where things are? She said, the pause deliberate. Since I won't be moving them. I nodded. After dessert, I said. I'll walk you through. And I'll write it down if you want. She let out a breath I hadn't realised she was holding. Thank you, she said, fingers resting on the guest key tag like it might steady her. In the quiet between sentences, the house felt like it belonged to me again. The blue backlight of the keypad glowed faintly down the hall. The envelope sat open on the table, rules in plain sight, the tag catching the light every time someone passed a plate. 2 Sundays after that dinner, a light knock came first. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Dropping off soup. Okay to come in? I wiped my hands on a towel and typed back, Give me 5. When I opened the door, Teresa stood on the porch with a mason jar cradled in both hands, like it might break if she breathed wrong. A strip of masking tape on the lid read, Chicken noodle, wed, in those tidy block letters. She glanced at the keypad and then at me. Hi, she said. Come in, I said, and I stepped back and held the door. She stopped just inside, waiting. Her eyes moved around the room the way someone's do when they're remembering a layout. After dessert that first night, I'd walked her through where things live now. Showed her the pot spot, the spice shelf, the drawer with the bottle opener and the red flashlight. She tucked the little index card I wrote into her purse. Today, her hands stayed wrapped around the jar. Where would you like it? She asked. Counter by the stove is perfect, I said. I watched her set it down exactly where I pointed, and not an inch to the left. No lid twisting, no casual straightening of the towel draped on the oven handle. The label made me smile despite myself. Coffee? I offered, because it felt like the next right thing, and because I wanted to watch us do this like normal people. She nodded. Half, if you have it. We stood in the kitchen without bumping. I poured and added a splash of milk. She kept her hands visible, palms around the mug. Luna appeared briefly at her mailbox and shot me a little thumbs up over the hedge. I lifted my chin back. Teresa took a sip, then set the mug down on the coaster. I put the rules card on my fridge, she said, not looking at me, like it was easier to tell the air. I read it twice? Thank you, I said. She touched the tag hanging from a key on her ring and held it up. Guest key, for emergencies only. The words were a little smudged from her thumb. This is on its own ring, she said, so I don't grab it without thinking. That works, I said. We let the quiet be quiet. She took another sip, then a breath that sounded like she was stepping onto a new floor. Rachel reorganized my pantry last month, she said. As a joke. She gave a small, rueful laugh. She put the pasta where I keep the baking, swapped the oils and the vinegars. I pretended it was funny. It made me crazy for a week. I couldn't help it. A laugh escaped. I'm sorry, I said. And also, not sorry. I know, she said, a little smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't connect it. Not really. I thought I was helping. I like order. It feels like love to me. She looked up then. It doesn't feel like that to you. It feels like somebody else's hands in my life, I said, matter of fact. She nodded. Understood. She said it the same way as at dinner, but this time it didn't sound like a bruise. I can ask where the pot goes, I can text, I can wait on the porch with soup. You're doing it, I said. This is good. We didn't hug. We talked about Abel's new project and what Basil does when it gets too much sun. She finished her coffee and rinsed her mug without moving anything else, then set it upside down on the rack right where I keep it. Before she left, she glanced at the thermostat and then at me. I won't touch that, she said, almost sheepish. We set our own schedule, I said. Dan figured out how to lock the buttons. Good, she said, like she meant it. When she stood, she reached for the jar, then thought better, and left it where it was. I'll text next time, she said at the door, before I leave the driveway. Okay, I said. We'll open the door. After she went, I ladled a little soup into a bowl and ate it standing up. It was good. She does know how to cook. I took a picture of the label and sent it to Dan. Look what just got dropped off. Knock plus text. Hands kept to herself. Proud of Mum, he texted back. Proud of us. That night, without me prompting, he turned off the TV and slid onto the counter stool while I packed leftovers. I'm sorry, he said, for making you carry it, for calling it love when it didn't feel like it to you. He tapped the rules card on the side of the fridge. I'll keep this front and centre, with Mum, with Rachel. Okay, I said, and I believed him. He'd already called the electric company the day after dinner and paid the fee. He switched the utilities to email notifications, even though he likes paper. The thermostat's schedule stayed where we set it. The junk drawer had pens and batteries and no labels. On Wednesday, Teresa texted a photo of a grocery aisle and asked if we needed anything from the store. On Friday, she knocked. And when I didn't answer right away because my hands were in dishwater, she texted, waiting on the porch, no rush. Rachel sent a link to a pie recipe and a snarky caption. She hasn't touched my pantry. Abel asked for the ZT recipe and got it. The house is quiet in the best way now. The keypad gives a soft beep when we come home. The fern looks fine because I water it on Sundays. The envelope with the old brass key sits in the drawer like a story we told and finished. The kitchen stays where I leave it, and so does my peace.
Family dinners at my sister Milena's house were always a masterclass in passive-aggressive performance art. Tonight, the main act was me. Before I continue, comment your country or city. I love seeing where my stories land. My name is Zoe, and I'm 32 years old. For the past decade, I've poured my life into building a wellness studio from the ground up, starting with just a massage table in a rented room. I paid my way through school, worked 3 jobs, and eventually scraped enough together to open my own place. It's thriving, actually. I have 5 employees, a waiting list of clients, and enough stability that I haven't had to ask my parents for a dime since I was 18. But none of that ever seemed to register. So Zoe, my mother, Sasha, said, her voice dripping with the kind of saccharine sweetness that always preceded a verbal jab. She was 58, impeccably dressed, and perpetually disappointed in me. Still doing massages, dear? After all these years? I was sitting across from her at Milena's polished mahogany dining table, surrounded by the usual suspects. Milena, 36, the lawyer, sat at the head. Her husband, Santiago, 38, the other lawyer, beside her. My brother Adrian, 34, the perpetually almost there entrepreneur, was on my left, already halfway through his second glass of red wine. Stephanie, 33, my middle sister and the queen of curated perfection, sat next to her husband Ellis, 35, who nodded along to whatever Stephanie said. My father, Clyde, 61, was at the far end, quiet as ever, just happy to be fed. Yes, Mom, I replied, my smile feeling like it was glued on. It's what I do. My studio is doing really well. Sasha just hummed, a non-committal sound that translated to, That's nice, dear, but it's not a real job. No one else even looked up. They were used to this dance. Earlier, I'd arrived with a homemade apple pie, still warm from my oven. I'd spent hours on it, perfecting the lattice crust, using the crispest Honey Crisps. It was my small contribution, a quiet way of showing I cared, even if my contributions were rarely seen. When dessert rolled around, everyone raved. Zoe, this pie is incredible, Stephanie exclaimed, taking a second slice. The crust is divine. Adrian grunted his approval, mouth full. Even Milena, usually too busy dissecting legal briefs in her head, admitted, It's surprisingly good, Zoe. A tiny spark of pride flickered inside me. Maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different. Then Sasha cleared her throat, a delicate, almost imperceptible sound that nonetheless commanded attention. Oh yes, she said, beaming at the table. Isn't it wonderful? I picked it up from that lovely little bakery downtown this morning. They do such a marvelous job. The spark died. My fork clattered against my plate. Everyone murmured their agreement, nodding at Sasha, praising her for finding such a wonderful bakery. My father, Clyde, even gave her a proud little smile. He knew. He had to know. But he said nothing. He never did. I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest, a slow burn of indignation that had been simmering for decades. I forced my lips into a polite, thin line. Yes, Mom. It's a very good bakery. Later, after Adrian had regaled everyone with a rambling, self-aggrandizing account of his latest disruptive business idea, which sounded suspiciously like the last three that had failed spectacularly, Sasha raised her glass. To Adrian, she announced, her voice ringing with pride, for always taking risks, for having the courage to chase his dreams no matter the setbacks. That's what true success looks like. My blood ran cold. Setbacks was a polite word for the crater he'd left in his wake, a crater that had swallowed a significant chunk of my parents' retirement savings, though no one ever spoke of it directly. And courage? What about the quiet, relentless grit it took to build something from nothing without a safety net, without a single cheer from the sidelines? That wasn't courage, apparently. That was just being Zoe, invisible. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. The words I wanted to scream lodged in my throat. I just smiled, a brittle, fragile thing, and excused myself. I needed air. I needed out. As I grabbed my coat from the hall closet, I heard Sasha's voice, clear and sharp, carrying from the dining room. I just wish Zoe would grow up. Everyone else did. I didn't look back. I just walked out the door and into the cool night air, the sound of her words echoing in my ears. The sting of Mom's words, I just wish Zoe would grow up. Everyone else did, followed me all the way home. But by the time I unlocked my apartment door, the anger had cooled into something colder, sharper. It wasn't just about the pie or the toast to Adrian. It was about a lifetime of being overlooked, of my quiet achievements being dismissed while my siblings' loudest failures were celebrated as risks. This particular brand of family blindness wasn't new. It was a constant hum in the background of my life, a low-frequency noise I'd learned to live with. But it had amplified significantly about a year and a half ago when the hum turned into a frantic, hushed shouting match I wasn't meant to hear. I'd gone over to my parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, to drop off some of my homemade elderberry syrup for Dad's cough. They were usually home around then. Dad would have been pushing 60, Mom in her mid-50s. As I approached the front door, I heard it. Not muffled, but raw, desperate. Clyde, what are we going to do? Mom's voice, usually so composed, was shrill. They're threatening foreclosure, $110,000. How could Adrian do this to us? My hand froze on the doorknob. Adrian? Of course. His latest brilliant venture, a rental property he'd bought with their co-signed loan, promising passive income and early retirement for them. Instead, it had become a money pit, then a legal nightmare, and finally a complete bust. He'd walked away, dusting his hands, already on to the next big idea. My parents, however, were left holding the bag. Sasha, keep your voice down. Dad, quiet as ever, sounded tired, defeated. He said he'd figure it out. He's working on it. Working on what? Another failed startup? We're going to lose everything, Clyde. Everything we worked for. I peered through the living room window, just enough to see them. Mom was clutching a crumpled letter, her face pale. Dad was rubbing his temples, a vein throbbing in his forehead. It looked like a foreclosure notice, plain as day, on $10,000. It hit me like a physical blow. That was their mortgage, the one they'd been chipping away at for 30 years. Adrian's risk had put their home, their security, at stake. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. They'd never ask me for help. Not in a million years. In their eyes, I was still the kid who did massages, the one who hadn't gone to law school or landed a corporate job. They didn't know about the 5-year plan I'd meticulously executed, the sleepless nights spent balancing books, the loan I'd secured to expand my studio, or the fact that I was now making more than Adrian ever had in his life. They didn't know I could help, and they certainly wouldn't let me. It would be an admission of their golden boy's failure and an acknowledgement of my quiet success, two things they seemed incapable of processing. That night, I started making calls, not to them, but to a lawyer specializing in real estate and financial transactions. I explained vaguely that I wanted to make an anonymous payment on a mortgage. The lawyer, a no nonsense woman named Ms. Chen, didn't bat an eye. She suggested setting up an LLC for anonymity and legal protection. She'd explained, "You'll be the sole owner, but the payment will come from the LLC. No direct link to you." I thought about names. Something innocuous. Something that wouldn't raise eyebrows. Michelle D. It was my middle name and the initial of our surname. Simple. Unassuming. Within weeks, Michelle D. Holdings, LLC, was registered. Ms. Chen handled all the paperwork. It felt surreal, signing documents that would erase a debt that had been crushing my parents, all while keeping my involvement a secret. The money was there, sitting in my business account, a testament to years of quiet, relentless work. It was a substantial sum, but I'd been saving aggressively, reinvesting, and my studio was finally generating significant profit. It wouldn't cripple me. It would, however, free them. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not Adrian, not Milena, not Stephanie, not even my father. The only person I started to confide in, slowly, was Vada Hamilton, my business partner. She'd joined me about 8 months ago, a whirlwind of energy and brilliant ideas, and at 29, she was already a force. We'd bonded over late-night paperwork sessions and shared frustrations about the wellness industry. One evening, after I'd accidentally let slip a vague detail about family drama, Vada had looked at me, her dark eyes perceptive. "You know, Zoe," she'd said, leaning back in her chair, "you carry a lot of weight, and you never let anyone see how strong you are. It's like you're afraid to let your wins show." I just shrugged, but her words stuck with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was. But watching my parents struggle, knowing I could fix it and knowing they'd never accept it from me directly, it felt like the only way. A quiet, unseen act, a secret strength. The echo of Mom's words, "I just wish Zoe would grow up." Everyone else did, faded into the background hum of my life, replaced by the constant thrum of my expanding business. It had been a few weeks since Milena's dinner, and the incident had just reinforced what I already knew. My family saw what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see was not me. My studio, the quiet haven, was anything but quiet these days. We just finished renovating the adjacent unit, adding 2 new treatment rooms, a small yoga studio, and a dedicated space for workshops. My calendar was a chaotic masterpiece of color-coded appointments, staff schedules, and vendor meetings. I was often there until midnight, sometimes later, doing paperwork, prepping for the next day, or just sitting in the quiet, empty space, feeling the weight of everything I'd built. Nobody in my family knew the real cost of this. They didn't know I'd worked 3 jobs through college, paying my tuition and rent myself, while Adrian was still getting his allowance for his entrepreneurial pursuits. They didn't know about the years I pulled triple shifts, living on instant noodles and pure stubbornness, saving every spare dollar. They certainly didn't know about the substantial loan I'd taken out to secure this new, larger space, a loan I was now comfortably paying down thanks to a steady stream of clients and Vada's sharp business acumen. My parents, Sasha and Clyde, probably still pictured me in a tiny, dimly lit room, kneading backs for minimum wage. The irony was almost comical. While Adrian was busy burning through their retirement savings on his latest pipe dream, I was quietly building a small empire, brick by brick, massage by massage. My work was my sanctuary, and sometimes my therapy. I spent my days listening to people's stories, their stresses, their physical and emotional pain. I'd knead out knots from shoulders hunched over keyboards, soothe aching muscles from too much running, or simply hold space for someone who just needed to feel seen and touched in a gentle, non-judgmental way. Just yesterday, I had a client, Sarah, a woman in her late 40s who carried the weight of her entire family on her shoulders. She came in with a tension headache that had lasted days. As I worked on her neck and scalp, she started talking, slowly at first, then a torrent of frustration about her ungrateful kids and demanding husband. I just listened, offering a quiet hum of understanding, a gentle pressure point here and there. By the end of the session, her headache was gone and her eyes were clearer. "Thank you, Zoe," she'd whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You understand?" I smiled, a genuine one this time. "That's what I'm here for, Sarah." But as she left, I felt the familiar ache in my own chest. I could help Sarah release her burdens, but who was there to release mine? Who saw my quiet strength, my silent struggles, the emotional damage from years of being the family's ghost, the one who was never quite good enough, was a knot I couldn't quite massage out of myself. Vada, my business partner, was the closest I had to an ally who truly understood. She was 29, sharp as a tack, and had a way of cutting through my self-effacing tendencies. She'd joined me about 8 months ago, bringing a fresh perspective and a drive that matched my own. She'd seen the numbers, the growth, the sheer volume of work I put in. She saw me. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of back-to-back appointments and a late-night staff meeting, I was finally home, collapsing onto my couch. My phone buzzed. It was Vada. "You always hide your wins," the text read. "Time for someone to notice." Sasha Delgado considered herself a woman who paid attention. She managed the household finances, kept track of every bill, and prided herself on her meticulous organization. So when a plain white envelope arrived from their mortgage lender, addressed simply to occupant, she opened it with her usual efficiency, expecting a routine statement. What she found inside made her perfectly manicured hand tremble. It wasn't a statement, it was a letter dated just a few days prior, confirming that the outstanding mortgage balance on their property had been paid in full. Zero balance, account closed. Her eyes scanned the document, then scanned it again, searching for a name, a familiar account number, anything that made sense. There, tucked away in a small print section, was the source of the payment: Michelle D. Holdings, LLC. Michelle D. Holdings, LLC. The name meant absolutely nothing to her. Sasha, 58, felt a cold dread creep up her spine. This was impossible. They were still struggling with the fallout from Adrian's disastrous real estate venture, the one that had left them with a crushing $110,000 debt. She and Clyde, 61, had been quietly chipping away at it, making larger payments when they could, but they were nowhere near paying it off, not even close. She immediately called Clyde, who was out playing golf. "Clyde, did you pay off the mortgage?" she demanded, her voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. "What?" "No, Sasha, you know we can't afford that right now," he replied, his voice muffled by the phone. "Why? Did something happen?" "The bank sent a letter. It says our mortgage is paid. By some Michelle D. Holdings, LLC. A beat of silence. Then, "Michelle who?" "No, I don't know anything about that." "Are you sure it's not a scam?" "It's on official letterhead, Clyde. This is real." "Someone paid off our mortgage." Sasha hung up, her mind racing. If not Clyde, then who? Adrian. It had to be Adrian, 34. Maybe his latest venture had actually paid off, and he was trying to surprise them. It would be just like him to make a grand gesture without telling anyone. She dialed Adrian's number. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Adrian, did you pay off our mortgage?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. Another pause. No, Mom. "Why would I do that? I'm still, building capital. What are you talking about?" Sasha explained the letter, the LLC name. Adrian sounded genuinely confused, even a little annoyed. "Michelle D? Never heard of them." "Look, Mom, I'm in the middle of a call." "I'll ask around, but I really doubt it's anything to do with me." He hung up. Sasha stared at her phone, then at the letter. Not Clyde, not Adrian. Who then? Milena, 36? Stephanie, 33? No, they would have said something. Milena would have made a big deal out of it, and Stephanie would have posted about it on social media, framing it as a family triumph. And besides, neither of them had the kind of liquid cash to just wipe out a six-figure debt. Her eyes fell on the return address on the envelope. It was a P.O. box, but the city and zip code were clear. The same city where Zoe, 32, lived. The same city where Zoe's little wellness studio was located. A cold, unsettling thought began to form. No, it couldn't be. Zoe? Her quiet, unassuming daughter who still did massages? The one who barely made enough to keep herself afloat, in Sasha's estimation? It was laughable, and yet, the name, Michelle D. Zoe's middle name was Michelle, and D was for Delgado. It was too much of a coincidence. Sasha picked up her phone again, her fingers hovering over Zoe's contact. She needed answers, but she couldn't just blurt it out. She needed to be subtle, to fish. She decided to leave a voicemail. It felt less confrontational, gave Zoe space to respond or not. After the beep, Sasha forced a light, casual tone into her voice. Hi, Zoe, it's Mom. Just calling to see how you are, dear. And, well, I received a rather curious letter today. Do you know anything about Michelle D? She ended the call, her heart hammering. The silence on the other end felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken possibilities. Sasha's voicemail, the one asking about Michelle D, sat in my inbox for 3 days. 3 days of me staring at my phone, seeing her name pop up with texts. Just checking in, dear. Hope you're well. Did you get my message about that curious letter? And ignoring every single one. My finger hovered over the delete button more than once. The thought of confronting her, of finally pulling back the curtain on the secret I'd kept for so long, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Vada, bless her, had noticed my distraction. You're walking around like you're waiting for a shoe to drop, she'd observed one afternoon, watching me absent-mindedly rearrange a display of essential oils for the 3rd time. Everything okay? Just family stuff, I'd mumbled. She'd just nodded, her eyes knowing. Remember what I said? About hiding your wins? Her words had echoed in my head. Time for someone to notice. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time. The constant, low-level hum of being underestimated, of being the family's invisible disappointment, had been a heavy cloak for too long. On the 4th day, a Tuesday, I finally decided to call her back. I was in my office, the door closed, the sounds of the studio muffled. My heart was thumping a rhythm against my ribs, a strange mix of dread and anticipation. I took a deep breath and dialed. She answered on the first ring, almost as if she'd been waiting. Zoe? Oh, hello, dear. I was just thinking about you. Her voice was polite, almost overly so, but there was a strained quality underneath, like a violin string pulled too tight. Hi, Mom, I said, trying to keep my own voice neutral. How are things at the studio? Busy, I imagine. You're always so busy. It was the usual small talk, the kind that always felt like a preamble to something else. She asked about my week, about a client she vaguely remembered me mentioning once. I gave terse, polite answers. I could almost hear her trying to find the right entry point. Then, the pause, the one that always came before the real question. Zoe, she began, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. About that letter I mentioned. The one about the mortgage. My grip tightened on my phone. Here it was. Yes? I prompted, keeping my tone flat. Well, it said the mortgage was paid off. Completely. And the payment came from Michelle D. Holdings, LLC. She paused, letting the name hang in the air. Do you know anything about that, dear? We've asked Adrian, and he has no idea. Your father is baffled. It's all very mysterious. I closed my eyes for a brief second. The silence stretched thick and heavy between us. I could picture her on the other end, probably clutching the phone, her brow furrowed with suspicion and a dawning, unwelcome realization. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for, consciously or unconsciously, for years. I opened my eyes and looked at the framed photo on my desk. Vada and me, smiling, covered in paint from our renovation efforts. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. Who is Michelle D? she repeated, a little more insistent this time, a hint of desperation creeping into her voice. I took another slow, deliberate breath. That's me, Mom, I said, my voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. Michelle is my middle name, and D is for Delgado. Another beat of silence, longer this time. I could almost hear her brain scrambling, trying to reconcile the failure she'd always seen with the person who had just paid off her entire mortgage. Then I added, just for good measure, the words I'd heard countless times, the label they'd all affixed to me for so long. That's me. The failure. And then, before she could utter a single sound, before she could formulate a question, or an accusation, or an apology, I pressed the end call button. The click was loud in the sudden silence of my office. I lowered the phone slowly, my hands still trembling, but this time not from dread. I stood there, rooted to the spot, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could truly breathe. Deep, full, unburdened breaths. The click of the phone disconnecting from Sasha in Chapter 5 was the loudest sound I'd heard in years. It wasn't just the end of a call. It felt like the end of an era, a severing of an old, suffocating cord. For a few days, I felt light, almost giddy. Then, the silence from my family was deafening. No calls from Adrian, no texts from Milena or Stephanie, not even Dad. It was as if I'd vanished, or perhaps as if they were waiting for me to apologize for existing. A few weeks after that call, the Sunday texts started. Sasha, 58, had always been predictable. Every Sunday morning, without fail, a text would pop up on my phone. Not about the mortgage, not about Michelle D. Holdings, LLC. Never about that. Just innocuous things. Good morning, dear. Just made a lovely quiche. Recipe attached. Hope you're having a restful Sunday. Thinking of you. Milena and Santiago are hosting brunch next month. You should come. Saw a new spa open downtown. Yours is still doing well, I hope? Each one was a tiny, barbed hook designed to elicit a response, to pull me back into the family orbit on her terms. And each one I ignored. I didn't block her number. I just let them pile up, unread, a silent testament to the new boundary I was meticulously building. Instead of replying, I started journaling. It wasn't a conscious decision at first, just a need to put down the swirling thoughts that had been trapped inside me for so long. Pages filled with memories, the time Sasha had redecorated my childhood bedroom without asking, throwing out my art supplies because they made a mess, Adrian getting a new car after failing out of college while I was working 2 jobs to pay my tuition, Milena's constant, subtle digs about my niche career. It was all there, the quiet accumulation of years of emotional neglect, of being the family's afterthought. Writing it down didn't make the pain disappear, but it made it tangible, something I could look at, acknowledge, and begin to process. My studio continued to thrive. Vada, 29, was a whirlwind of energy, constantly pushing me to think bigger. She'd been my biggest cheerleader since she joined me 8 months ago, and she saw the potential I often overlooked. Zoe, we need to do a soft launch for the expanded space, she insisted one afternoon, waving a marketing plan in front of me. Invite local businesses, some of our best clients, maybe a few influencers. Get some buzz going. I cringed. A launch? Vada, you know I hate that kind of attention. We're doing fine with word of mouth. Doing fine isn't enough when you've built something this incredible, she countered, her arms crossed. You always hide your wins. This isn't just about massages anymore, Zoe. You've built a community, a haven. People need to see that. You need to let people see that. Her words resonated, but the old discomfort lingered. The idea of being in the spotlight, of celebrating my own success, felt alien. It felt like I was inviting judgment, or worse, dismissal. I'd spent so long being invisible, it was hard to imagine being seen. A few weeks later, the sting of invisibility hit again, not from my mother, but from Milena, 36. I was scrolling through social media, a rare moment of downtime, when I saw her post. It was a picture of her, Adrian, and Stephanie, all smiling brightly at some fancy restaurant. The caption read, So grateful for family who understand the true meaning of ambition and success. Some people just can't handle family success, but we thrive together. My name wasn't mentioned, of course. It never was. But the message was clear, a thinly veiled jab at my perceived lack of ambition and my supposed inability to handle their shining achievements. It cut deep, a familiar wound reopened. Even after everything, even after the mortgage, they still saw me as the same old Zoe, the one who couldn't quite measure up, the one who was still doing massages. I closed the app, a familiar tightness in my chest. Some people just can't handle family success. The irony was a bitter pill. That evening, as I was closing up the studio, my phone buzzed with a notification. A new Yelp review. I usually let Vada handle those, but curiosity got the better of me. The review was glowing, 5 stars, praising the serene atmosphere and healing touch. It was anonymous, signed simply S. My breath hitched. S. Sasha. It couldn't be. Could it? The Yelp review, signed simply S, gnawed at me. Was it Mom? Sasha, 58. Leaving an anonymous, glowing review after months of me ignoring her Sunday texts. It felt out of character. And yet the possibility lingered, a tiny, unsettling seed of curiosity. Despite my discomfort with attention, Vada, 29, had finally convinced me to host a private event. Not a grand public launch, but a small, intimate celebration for my studio's first year in its expanded space. It's about acknowledging your hard work, Zoe, she'd said, her voice firm but kind. Not for them, but for you. And for the people who believe in you. So, a few months after the Yelp review appeared, I sent out invitations. Not to my family, not to Sasha, Clyde, Adrian, Milena, Stephanie, Santiago, or Ellis. This was for my clients, my friends, the local businesses who had supported me, and my incredible staff. About 30 people, a cozy crowd. The evening arrived, a crisp autumn night. The studio was transformed. Soft lighting, a local jazz duo playing quietly in the corner, and the air filled with the scent of lavender and success. I wore a simple black dress, feeling more comfortable than I had in years. I was surrounded by people who genuinely appreciated what I did, who saw me. It was liberating. I was laughing with a longtime client, discussing the new aromatherapy blends, when the door opened. The jazz music seemed to falter for a beat. My smile froze. Standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed as always, was Sasha, my mother, uninvited. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me. Her expression was unreadable, a strange mix of defiance and something else. My stomach clenched. This was exactly what I'd feared, a scene, a confrontation, in front of everyone. Vada, ever perceptive, stepped subtly closer to me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Zoe? She murmured. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. This was my space. My moment. Sasha began to walk toward me, her heels clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. The conversations around us slowly died down. Everyone seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. My staff, my clients, my friends. They all turned, watching. She stopped a few feet in front of me, her gaze unwavering. Her eyes, usually so critical, held a strange glint. Zoe, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet room. I know. The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Everyone froze, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the public accusation, the humiliation, the moment she would finally tear down everything I'd built. But then, something unexpected happened. Her shoulders seemed to slump, just slightly. The defiance in her eyes softened, replaced by a flicker of something akin to awe. I know what you did, she repeated, her voice quieter this time, almost a whisper. She looked around the beautiful, bustling studio, at the smiling faces of my staff, at the proud expressions of my clients. Her gaze returned to me, lingering. I never thought you could pull something like this off. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a shout. It was a concession, a quiet, almost reluctant admission. The words, delivered in front of everyone, felt like a strange kind of victory, not loud, not triumphant, but profoundly satisfying. A slow smile spread across my face, genuine and unforced, the kind of smile I hadn't allowed myself around her in years. "That's the problem, Mom," I said, my voice steady, clear, and calm. "You never asked what I was capable of." The jazz music started up again, a little hesitant at first, then gaining confidence. People slowly resumed their conversations, though many glances still darted our way. Sasha just stood there, looking at me, really looking at me, for what felt like the first time. One of my staff members, unaware of the tension, approached us with a tray of small, perfectly portioned apple tarts. "Would you like one, Mrs. Delgado? Zoe made them herself." Sasha's eyes flickered to the tart, then back to me. She picked one up, took a bite. Her eyes widened. She froze mid-chew. Then, slowly, she looked up at me, the tart still half-eaten in her hand. Her voice was barely audible. You made this?" I met her gaze, a tiny, knowing smirk playing on my lips. "No, Mom," I said, my voice sweet, echoing her words from that night at Milena's. "A bakery did." The memory of Sasha, 58, standing in my studio, her face a mask of bewildered realization as she bit into that apple tart, still brought a quiet satisfaction months later. The private event had been a success, not just for the studio, but for me. It was the first time I'd truly owned my space, my success, without the need for their approval. Since that night, the Sunday texts from Sasha hadn't stopped. They were still there every week, a relentless drip of innocuous updates and invitations. "Your father and I went to the botanical gardens today. So lovely. You should come with us sometime." "Adrian's new business is really taking off. He's so busy. Hope you're not overworking yourself, dear." Sometimes she'd send a picture of a flower or a recipe for a casserole. I never replied. Not once. The silence from my end was a deliberate choice, a boundary I was finally strong enough to maintain. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about protecting my peace. My phone, usually buzzing with client bookings and staff questions, rarely lit up with a call from my family. Adrian, 34, Milena, 36, Stephanie, 33. They remained in their own orbit, probably still discussing my lack of ambition over brunch, blissfully unaware of the quiet earthquake I'd caused. Dad, Clyde, 61, remained silent, as he always had. I didn't expect him to change. He was a man who preferred the path of least resistance, and that path rarely involved confronting Sasha. Life at the Quiet Haven, however, was anything but quiet. We were thriving. The expanded space was fully utilized, with new clients booking daily. I'd recently hired 2 new massage therapists and a front desk assistant, easing some of the pressure on Vada, 29, and me. I spent more time training, mentoring, and planning for future expansions. We were looking into offering small wellness workshops, maybe even a meditation series. My days were long, but they were filled with purpose, with the tangible results of my own hard work. My life was full now, not loud or flashy, but deeply satisfying. I had a thriving business, a supportive partner in Vada, and a small circle of friends who saw me, truly saw me, for who I was. The constant need for external validation, particularly from my family, had finally begun to recede. It was like a chronic ache that had finally started to heal. I often thought about the mortgage, though $100,000. It was a significant sum, but it hadn't crippled me. Instead, it had liberated me in a way money never could. It wasn't about the financial transaction, it was about the power it gave me. The power to choose silence, to choose my own path, to finally shed the skin of the failure they had so carefully crafted for me. The revenge, if you could even call it that, hadn't changed Sasha. She was still Sasha, obsessed with appearances, subtly manipulative, and probably still convinced that my success was some kind of anomaly. But that wasn't the point. The point was, it had changed me. It had given me the courage to stop seeking their approval, to stop trying to fit into their narrow definition of success. I no longer needed them to see me. I saw myself, and that was enough. One crisp afternoon, a few months after the studio event, I was walking home after a long day. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. I passed a small, independent bakery I'd never noticed before, its windows steaming with the warmth inside. A display of freshly baked pies sat on a rack, their crusts golden and inviting. A small smirk touched my lips. I paused, then pushed open the door, the scent of cinnamon and apples washing over me. I walked up to the counter, pointed to a perfect apple pie, and paid for it. Sometimes silence is loud enough.
The spare key to my car sits in a blue ceramic bowl by my door, bright as a dare. Most mornings I grab my travel mug, sling my stethoscope, and ignore it. Today, I stare until my coffee goes cold. My name is Jennifer. I'm 29, and I work the early shift as a medical assistant at a community clinic in Fort Lauderdale. I rent a small one-bedroom off Broward Boulevard, second-floor walk-up, windows that face a parking lot, and a silver 2012 Civic I've babied through a decade of Florida sun. I'm usually unlocking the clinic by 5:45 a.m., drawing labs by 6:15, done by mid-afternoon. It suits me. Early, quiet, predictable tasks, charts lined up in the same order every day. I'm reliable until someone treats that like a blank check. My younger sister, Grace, is 24. She's a salon receptionist with hours that move around, a single mom to Lucy, who turned 2 in May. Grace lives 10 minutes away with Lucy and a mountain of toddler laundry. Our mom, June, is 55 and 15 minutes past, believing every problem can be smoothed with a favor and a plate of something. We are close in that loud, overlapping way where I'll help sometimes quietly becomes I'll fix. The spare key started as a good idea, just in case turned into I'll grab it for daycare pickup, and I'll drop Mom's prescriptions, and I let it slide because that felt like love. Lately, it's been my car disappearing before dawn and reappearing after I'm home. Full tank most of the time, crumbs in the seat, Lucy's stuffed giraffe wedged under the backrest. I've avoided a fight I could feel vibrating under everything. The key stayed in the bowl like an invitation. I get the envelope on a Tuesday at 2:30 p.m., the mail wedged crooked in my metal box downstairs. Thick, official, return address from SunPass toll-by plate and the City of Fort Lauderdale's red light enforcement office. On my kitchen table, I break the seal with my thumbnail and pull out 3 sheets, 2 toll notices totaling $212, and 1 red light citation for 168. The dates are from the last 2 weeks, weekdays when I was in scrubs at a phlebotomy chair at 6:15 a.m. There are photos with each, blurry plates that are, unmistakably, my plates. A tiny shot of my front bumper at a toll gantry at 7:42 a.m. Another with the timestamp. I know I was showing a kid how to breathe through a blood draw. The red light frame freeze, right turn on red without a full stop, sits there like a trap door. My chest tightens the way it does when a patient's veins roll under my needle and I have to reset everything and breathe. I call Mom first because that's what I do. She answers on the second ring like she was already holding the phone. "Hey, baby," she says. "You sound tight." "I got tolls and a red light ticket," I say. $380. I wasn't driving. She doesn't ask who was. She doesn't have to. "Just pay it to keep things simple," she says, automatic as turning on a light. "You know how Grace is. That salon makes her jump all over, and daycare. Lucy gets fussy when they're late." "Simple for who?" I ask. My voice comes out steady, which surprises me. "For all of us." She sighs. "It's family. Family as a reason and not a conversation." That old pinch in my chest tightens. "I'm not paying these," I say, and I hear the quiet on her end grow cold and careful. "Don't start," she says, soft warning. "I'll bring Grace over tonight. We'll figure it out." After we hang up, I pull the citations closer and open my laptop. I log into my SunPass account and see the drives, weekday morning trips I didn't take. I take pictures of the paper notices with my phone, then download the electronic copies too. I scroll through the images until I hit the frames with my license plate and the timestamps. I save everything in a folder labeled Car June, because I need to be able to find it fast when my adrenaline is high. I text Grace. "Can you come by tonight at 7? It's about the car." She replies 5 minutes later. "I'm at work till 6:30. Can Lucy come?" Then, "What car?" That second text makes my jaw clench. "Yes, bring Lucy." I type back. "You know what car." I rinse my mug, set it upside down on the rack, and walk back to the bowl by the door. The key's shape is familiar against my palm. The rubber head softened from years of my hand. I put it back and roll the combination on the lock I've been meaning to install on a little wall safe I impulsively bought last month and never mounted. My hand pauses. Not yet. I want a conversation before I start drilling into walls. By 4 p.m., the late light is sliding across my table, and the fines sit there like a third-place setting. I text my co-worker, Shanice. She's 32, practical in the way that makes everything feel doable, and tell her I might be asking her about forms tomorrow. She sends back a string of gavel emojis and, "Bring receipts." "I'm bringing receipts," I write back, and I mean it. Digital ones. At 6:50 p.m., I put bowls and forks on the table because feeding people keeps me from pacing. I make spaghetti with jarred sauce and slice a cucumber like it's a job. I put Lucy's old sippy cup at the corner of the table because I've picked it up from my floor enough times to know it's easier to be ready. When their knock comes right at 7, I'm ready in a way I haven't been before. Mom steps in first with a tight smile. Grace follows, Lucy on her hip, and my eyes go to the bowl by the door and then to the envelope on the table. I take a breath that reaches all the way down. Tonight, I'm not the plan. I'm the person who keeps records. June comes in with a Tupperware of cookies wrapped in a dish towel like sugar can mop up a mess. Grace shifts Lucy to her other hip and kicks her flip-flops off at the door like it's any other Tuesday, like my car isn't the third person in the room. "Hi, baby," Mom says, kissing my cheek. Her eyes dart to the envelope on the table. "We brought snickerdoodles." "Hey," Grace says, bright and a little breathless. "Lucy, say hi to Aunt Jen." Lucy buries her face in Grace's shoulder and peeks at me with one eye. I step back to let them in. The blue bowl with the spare key is right there on the entry table. I keep my hands to myself. We do the small talk dance for maybe a minute. Daycare nap schedule. The heat. Mom's basil plant clinging to life. Then Mom slips a manila folder out of her tote and slides a sheet across my table. It's printed from a template, boxes and lines and payment plan centered at the top. Under Responsible Party is my full name in Mom's careful block letters. "I thought we could make this easy," she says, gentle. "We mapped it out so it doesn't hit all at once." The fork in my hand feels heavier than it should. "My name's on this," I say. "You can afford a little every paycheck?" she says quickly, eyes soft like that will soften me too. You know Grace's hours are a mess right now. Grace sets Lucy down and carries the cookies into my kitchen. I hear the Tupperware lid pop and Mom's voice drop low. I turn to grab napkins, and their words float through the doorway like they meant them to stay in the kitchen. "She's never said no! She'll pay the tickets," Mom whispers. "I know," Grace says, softer. Then, "I'm sorry, The sorry is the size of a breath. I put the napkins down and take my phone from the counter. "Let's sit," I say, and we all move back to the table. Lucy climbs onto a chair, bangs both palms on the wood, then reaches for a cookie. I hand her a napkin and put water in the sippy cup I left out. I open the folder on my phone I named earlier and tap. The first toll photo fills the screen, the timestamp strip along the bottom. 7:42 a.m., last Wednesday. There's a small rectangle of my windshield, a sliver of rearview mirror. In the mirror, a reflection, big round lenses I've rolled my eyes at 100 times. I turn the phone toward them. "Those are Grace's sunglasses, Mom." The air drops out of the room. Mom's mouth folds in on itself. Grace lets out a laugh that pitches too high and edges into a cough. "It's just..." She starts, then tries again. "It's just family, Jen." On the next swipe, Lucy's car seat sits in the back, unmistakable, grey with little stars, the strap that always twists unless I fix it. The third photo shows my cup holder. The chipped floral mug that lives by Grace's sink is sitting there, lipstick at the rim, chip catching the light. I don't say anything about that one. I don't need to. Mom presses her fingertips to the paper with my name on it like she's smoothing a wrinkle. "We're not arguing about what happened," she says carefully. "We're talking about how to make it right without making a big thing." "I was at work when these happened," I say. "You can call Dr. Patel and ask if you want. I was drawing labs at 6:15 both those mornings. I didn't run a red light. I didn't take a toll road." Grace's mouth tilts into a familiar shape, half embarrassed, half charmed. "You know I wouldn't do this if I had a choice," she says. "Daycare charges if I'm late, and buses are a mess, and my Uber rating is trash because of Lucy's snacks. I thought you'd..." "Pay," I say, not a question. She lifts one shoulder. "It's just family." I slide the payment plan back toward them, exactly the way Mom slid it to me. The page scratches against the wood. I keep my pen capped on the table between us. "I'm not signing anything with my name on it for fines I didn't get," I say, still calm, because I practiced saying it to my shower tile earlier. "I'm not paying these." Mom's face tightens in the places that usually soften. "Jennifer," she says, like we're crossing a line we can't uncross. "Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." "It got big when my car started leaving before dawn without me," I say. "It got big when my name and plates showed up on tickets I didn't earn." I tap my phone. "I brought the photos because I don't want this to be about feelings. It's about what happened." Grace reaches for a cookie and doesn't eat it. Lucy licks sugar off her fingers and hums, oblivious. The bowl by the door catches the light, and I see the dull shine of the rubber key head. "What do you want, then?" Grace asks, but it sounds like a challenge. "Responsibility in the right name," I say. "That's it." Mom sighs like air leaving a balloon. She pulls the paper back the rest of the way, folds it once, then again. For a second I think she'll slide it back anyway. She doesn't. I keep my pen capped. I wake up before my alarm, the kind of wired that feels like I drank coffee in my sleep. The bowl by the door holds the car key and looks like it's staring back at me. I grab my mug, grab my badge, and leave it there. At 5:45 a.m., I'm unlocking the clinic like always, the hallway lights popping on in a slow wave. By lunch, I've replayed last night, enough times that it's made a groove in my head. I find Shanice in the break room with her yogurt and her crossword and drop into the chair across from her. "How'd it go?" she asks without looking up. "They brought a payment plan with my name filled in," I say. "I brought photos." Shanice lets out a low whistle. "Okay, receipts. What do we need to do next?" I slide my phone across to her with the email from SunPass open. "They have an affidavit to transfer liability if I wasn't the driver." She squints at the link, taps. "Affidavit of non-ownership chucked not in care or control," she reads. "And the red light one has an affidavit too. You'll need to name the driver and attach proofs." She points to the little line that says, "Must be notarized." "We can print these. There's a notary at the UPS on Sunrise." "You off by 2? 2:30, I say. "I can swing by after." We commandeer the clinic printer for 10 minutes. I fill out the forms at the table where we usually do staff potlucks, writing slowly, dates, times, my plate number. I attach the download of the photos to the red light email portal, double-check the timestamps against my shift schedule. I list Grace as the driver because that's what happened. My hands are steady now that there are boxes to fill. "Cancel your SunPass too," Shanice says around a spoonful of yogurt. "If she tries a toll again, it hits toll by plate and not your account." I log in and hit deactivate on the little transponder number stuck to my windshield. Done. "And if you're feeling extra, make an appointment at the tax collector to get a new plate number," she adds. "People do it when they think their plate's compromised. Costs what, $30? I Google while the last form prints. Broward County Tax Collector. Next available is in 2 weeks at the 3:10 slot. I click it. Booked. Shanice bumps my knee with hers. There you go. Paper trail. Boundaries with teeth. After I clock out at 2:30, I swing by the UPS store. The notary stamp thunks down twice. Blue ink, neat initials. I keep all of it in a fresh manila folder like I'm building a little fence made of paper. In the parking lot, I text the family group chat. Spare key due today. I'm not lending my car or signing anything again. Then, because I know how my words get turned into tone, I add, I can help with scheduled rides after my shift. Mom replies with 3 dots in a row. Then, we hear you. Grace doesn't respond. On the way home, I stop at the hardware store for a small lockbox, the kind realtors use for house keys. I pick the cheap grey one because it looks like it means business without looking like a jail. I buy a set of wall anchors and a little screwdriver because mine keeps disappearing. My apartment hallway smells like someone overcooked onions. When I turn the corner, I see it before I see my door. A black lanyard and a key lying on my welcome mat. The rubber head is familiar, old groove worn by my thumb. No note. For a second I just stand there with my grocery bag and the lockbox, feeling the heat crawl back up my neck. I pick it up and turn it over. It's my spare. Same little blue bead I threaded on years ago so I could find it by feel. Either Grace took it when she left last night, or she had it all day. Leaving it on the mat feels like a confession and a dare. Inside, I lock my deadbolt. I take the lockbox into the hall closet and mount it to the stud with 2 screws, the metal biting into wood with a reassuring squeal. I take my time. I set the combination to Lucy's birthday so I won't forget it, and so I won't be tempted to hand it out. I slide the spare key inside and shut the door. Click. I text the group again. Got the key. Please don't leave it on the floor. I'll put it away. Mom sends, okay. Then, dinner Sunday. Maybe. I type back. I'll let you know after I see my schedule. I sit on the rug with the manila folder and flip through the forms one more time. Dates match. Photos attached. Transponder deactivated. DMV appointment set. It feels small and huge at the same time, like tightening a bolt that's been loose for months and not realizing how much rattling it was doing until it stops. When I stand, the blue bowl by the door is empty except for 2 pennies and a paperclip. I wash it and put it back anyway. Just a bowl now. No more invitations. The next morning I'm halfway through organizing flu shot consent forms when my phone buzzes against the counter. Grace. I let it go to voicemail because I'm drawing labs, then step outside to the alley behind the clinic on my 10-minute break and call back. Wind whips through the phone. I'm in the salon lot, she says without hello. Can I grab your car for a few hours? Daycare is strict about pickup and the bus is already late. No, I say, steady. I'm not lending the car. Silence tightens. Jen, please. They charge $1 a minute after 6. I can't afford that. I can pick up Lucy today if you add me to your authorized list, I say. I'm done at 2:30. I can be at daycare by 3:15. I can also send you the Broward transit routes. 22 runs straight down Broward. I can't do buses with a toddler and the stroller and my bag, she snaps. You know this. I hear you, I say. I can do a ride after my shift. I can't hand over the car. She exhales like she's trying to blow my answer over. You don't get it. I don't have anyone else. You have me, I say. For rides we schedule. I need it now, she says. It's just family. The words slide between us and sit there. I look at the dumpster lid and the way the sun hits the rim. I'm at work, I say. Text me Lucy's daycare info. I'll go by at 3:15. She comes back softer, bargaining. Could we just split the fines and call it even? I'll pay you back when tips are good. I'm not paying fines I didn't get, I say. If you want a ride today, tell the daycare to add me. She hangs up without answering. Back inside, I wash my hands twice and focus on labels and lot numbers because those don't care how I feel. At noon, I grab a sandwich and sit in the sliver of shade by the clinic door. I pull up the Broward County Transit site and screenshot the Route 22 timetable that runs by both our complexes. I add Route 1 that hits the strip where her salon is. I text them to Grace with, if you leave at 5:05, you'll be at daycare by 5:40. I can still do pickup at 3:15 if you add me. She doesn't respond. 5 minutes later, Mom calls. Your sister is crying in the break room, Mom says without preface. You couldn't just help this week. I offered, I say. After my shift, I can pick up Lucy today if Grace adds me. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, she says, soft and insistent. Just drop the key off, Jennifer. After this weekend, we'll figure a system. It got big when tickets showed up in my name, I say. I'm not lending the car. Mom's sigh crackles through the speaker. I raised you to take care of each other. You did, I say. I'm taking care of me, too. There's a pause, the kind where I know she's choosing between arguing or hanging up. Dinner, Sunday, she says finally, like a truce. Let's talk then. Maybe, I say. I'll check my schedule. When my shift ends, I stop by the dollar store on the way home and buy a small spiral notebook and a pack of pens that claim they don't smear. At my kitchen table, I crack it open to the first page and write the date in the corner. I keep it simple. Ask, can do, can't do, can't. I write yesterday. Tickets, asked me to pay, no. Rides after 2:30 p.m., yes, if scheduled. Car, lend, no. Today, daycare pickup, yes, offered 3:15, waiting on authorization. Seeing it in ink settles something. It's not a fight, it's a list. Grace finally texts at 2:05. Fine, you're on the list. They need your ID. On my way, I reply, and grab my keys. At the daycare, a young woman in a polo checks my license against a printed sheet. She underlines my name with a pink highlighter and says, "Sign here," like I've been on the list for months. Lucy barrels into me with sticky hands and a shout of, "Jen!" that knocks the hard edges off my day. We drive home with her, narrating every dog we see and counting stoplights to 4, and then back to 1. At 4:10, Grace shows up, hair frizzing from the humidity, eyes still shiny. She takes Lucy and says, "Thanks," small and quick, like if she says more, she'll say the wrong thing. "Tomorrow I can do the same," I say, "if you need it, but I can't." "I know," she says, looking everywhere but my face. "I know." After they leave, I jot it in the notebook. Picked up Lucy, 3 Palmerton, 15, yes. I write my own offers for the next few days. Thursday, free after 2:30. Friday, clinic meeting till 3:30, can do 4 more pickup. I'm rinsing out Lucy's sippy cup when my laptop dings. An email lands from Toll by Plate. Affidavit approved, liability reassigned. I click it open. It's short and boring. "We processed your affidavit. Future correspondence will be directed to the named party." A second email from the red light vendor follows a minute later with almost the same language and an attached PDF confirming the switch. I sit down and let the sound of my own exhale fill the room. Paperwork, not punishment. Consequences lined up with where they belong. I slide the printouts into the manila folder and write another line in the notebook. Affidavits approved. The blue bowl by the door is clean and empty, my lockbox hidden in the closet clicking comfort into the wood. My phone buzzes again, Mom texting a string of dots that mean she's composing a paragraph she hasn't found yet. I put the phone face down and look at my list. What I can do. What I can't. It's not complicated, it's just different. 2 weeks slide by in small, ordinary squares. I keep my early mornings and my notebook. Grace texts ahead twice for daycare pickups. I put them on my calendar and show up at 3:15 with Lucy's sippy cup ready. Once I drop groceries on Mom's porch on a Thursday after work, and she hugs me longer than usual without saying anything about money. Last week I took my 3:10 appointment at the tax collector office and swapped my plates, $32 and a screwdriver in the parking lot to switch the actual metal. New number, same car. The lockbox in my closet clicks shut every time I put the spare away. On a Tuesday, just after noon, my phone buzzes 5 times in a row while I'm restocking gauze. Mom, then Grace, then Mom again. I wait until my break to call back. "Baby," Mom says, voice already strained. "Your sister tried to renew her tag and there's a hold. They won't let her do it online. They're saying tolls and—" She lowers her voice like the phone could be offended. "Camera stuff. I sit on the bench in the alley and press my hand to the cool cinder block. That's what happens when the fines aren't paid, I say. The affidavits went through. The hold would be in her name now. She's crying in the bathroom at work, Mom says. Can you just... I can give her a ride to the DMV after my shift, I say. I'm off at 2:30. Payment is on Grace. Silence stretches. I can hear the TV in Mom's house in the background, some courtroom show droning. You really won't, she starts. No, I say. I won't. Mom sighs, defeated and a little angry. I'll tell her you'll take her. When I hang up, I find Shanice by the med fridge. She sees my face and hands me a granola bar before I ask. What's the latest? She says. Grace tried to renew her registration. Hold, I say. I offered a ride after work, that's all. Shanice nods, approving. Consequences aren't cruelty, she says, same tone she uses when reminding me to cap needles. You're not leaving her stranded. You're not paying for her bad turns on red. I keep thinking about Lucy's car seat, I admit. How all this still lands on the floor of a toddler's life. It lands on the adults who can fix it, she says, pointed but kind. A payment plan in her name keeps you from drowning. That helps Lucy too. I tuck the granola bar into my pocket anyway. It's a small thing that makes me feel prepared. At 1:40, my phone buzzes again. Grace, this time. They won't let me do it online. It says I have to go in person. Is this because of what you did? I type carefully. Because of the tickets. Liability is in your name now. I can drive you to the DMV after work. Bring your license, proof of insurance, and a card. She doesn't write back. 10 minutes later, Mom calls again, just to repeat herself, and I repeat myself back, a calm loop. At 2:30, I clock out and grab my bag. I keep my wallet in it, zippered. On the way to Grace's, I hit traffic on Broward and sit behind a bus with an ad for the very toll authority that sent me the email. I laugh once, sharp, and it bounces off my dashboard. Grace is waiting outside her complex with her hair piled up and her mouth set like a dare. She gets in and doesn't look at me. You're really going to make me do this? She says, staring through my windshield like the answer is somewhere down the block. I'm going to drive, I say. You're going to talk to the clerk and set up whatever you need to set up. That's the help I can give. Her jaw ticks. It's just family, she says, but quieter this time, less certain. It's still my name when things go wrong, I say. Not anymore. We don't talk much on the way. The government centre lot is half full, the sun turning everyone's dashboard into an oven. Inside, the fluorescent lights flatten everything, and the air smells like old plastic and paper. We take a number from the red dispenser, A405, and sit in chairs that are all the same shade of beige. Grace scrolls her phone, sighs, puts it down, picks it up. She cycles through angry, quiet, pleading without saying much out loud. I take out the granola bar and eat it slowly, focusing on chewing, on the numbers blinking above the counters, on not filling the space with apologies. She tries once more. We can split it and I'll pay you back, she says, eyes on the floor. I'm not splitting, I say. I'm here. That's my part. She leans back, arms crossed, blinking too fast. My stomach twists and untwists, thinking of Lucy's little shoes lined up by their door, the car seat strap that always flips. I breathe and look at the board. A4I1, A402, A403. My phone buzzes in my pocket. Shanice. You got this. I picture her thumbs up and keep my eyes on the blinking numbers. A405 flashes, and we stand. Grace looks at me like the floor might open. I gesture toward the counter. Let's go, I say. After work was the only time I could help. She nods once, and we walk to the window together. We follow the arrows on the floor toward the A numbers, past a sign about Real ID, and another about debit card fees. The board says A405 and points to window 7, but the clerk there is finishing with a man who brought a stack of papers in a rubber band. We hover behind the blue line and don't quite look at each other. Do you have your proof of insurance? I ask, keeping my voice low. Grace digs in her purse, eyes flicking. Yeah, she says, pulling out a folded card and her license. She bites a nail, then stops herself. I hate these places. Me too, I say because it's true. My phone buzzes in my pocket. Mom. I flip it to Do Not Disturb and slide it back in. Grace's phone buzzes too. She doesn't look. The room feels sticky with people's impatience. A toddler somewhere is chanting 1, 2, 3, 4, like he's discovered the only 4 numbers in the world. A woman in a bright flowered dress is practicing writing her new last name on an envelope. A guy in a construction shirt argues quietly with a clerk about late fees. The fluorescent lights hum. It all makes me feel small and steady at the same time. Just another person waiting her turn to do a bureaucratic thing. Grace shifts her weight from one foot to the other. I can't drive if my tag's expired, she says, voice tight. How am I supposed to get Lucy anywhere? You can drive when you get current, I say. That's why we're here. She gives me a sideways look. You could have just taken care of it this once. We didn't have to do all this. I keep my eyes on the counter, not on her. After work was the only time I could help, I say. This is me helping. You're punishing me, she says, not quite accusing, more like she's trying the words on. I'm protecting me, I say. I don't elaborate. Anything more will spiral us into the same loops we always run. She looks down at her hands. The chip in her thumbnail catches on her crossbody strap and snaps. She swears under her breath. My phone buzzes again despite D&D. It's Shanice's. You got this, from earlier, and somehow it still makes my shoulders drop a notch. I send a quick thumbs up back and tuck the phone away. The clerk at window 7, a woman with neat braids and a navy polo, slides the last paper through to the rubber band man and presses a square stamp that thunks satisfyingly. She looks up, her face neutral and kind of bored in a way that feels like a relief. No one here is going to take sides. She flips the light above her window from red to green. Next! She calls, and we step up to the blue tape line. Grace starts before the clerk even finishes saying hello. I tried to renew my tag online, and it says there's a hold, and I need to come here, and I don't know why. The clerk points at the small sign that says, "Please have ID ready," and smiles just enough to show she's a person, not a rule. "I'll pull up your record. License, please," she says. Her name tag is turned a little. I can't see the name yet. She types something fast and looks at the screen. Okay. Looks like there are outstanding toll violations and a red light citation attached to your plate. There's a registration hold until those are addressed. Grace's jaw tightens. Those cameras are unfair, she says immediately. Half the time the yellows are too short and anyone would roll that turn. The clerk keeps her tone even. I can't speak to camera placement, she says. I can tell you what's in the system and what options you have. I take one small step back, so I'm not in the center of the conversation. I'm close enough to hear, far enough that no one will look at me to answer. The clerk taps the keyboard. So, for the tolls, you can pay them in full today or set up a payment plan. For the red light, same. There's a fine and a processing fee. Once there's either payment or an approved plan, we can release the hold and you can renew your registration. Grace slides her insurance card and license across like they're excuses. It wasn't even my car most days, she says, softer now, almost to herself. The clock turns her screen slightly toward her, not enough to show everything, just enough to indicate she's not hiding it. She clicks, and a small image window pops up. Even at the distance, I know what those frames look like. The mirror, the sunglasses, the mug. The clerk's voice stays level. These are the citations we have. Do you want to make a payment today? Grace looks at me then, quick, instinctive, as if there's a script we've always followed and she's waiting for me to say my line. I keep my face open and calm. This is your part, I say, as gently as I can. I drove you. I'm here. She swallows and looks back at the counter. Can I do a plan? She asks the clerk, almost like she's asking if that's allowed. You can, the clerk says, already pulling a thin stack of forms from a clear organizer. We'll need your address, email, and a card for the initial payment. The rest will be auto-drafted monthly. Grace fumbles for her wallet. The zipper sticks. She tugs until it gives, and the sound is loud in the quiet. My phone buzzes again in my pocket. Mom. I don't look. I focus on breathing in for 4, out for 4, on the way the air conditioning blows from the vent above the window and lifts a strand of hair from Grace's forehead. The clerk slides a pen across, points where to sign. Grace writes her name slow. Her handwriting looks young when she's trying to be neat. She glances up like she's going to say something to me and then doesn't. We're 2 steps in, and the rest is going to be whatever the forms say it is. I keep my hands at my sides and my wallet in my bag and remind myself softly that after work was the only time I could help. The board dings again behind us, numbers changing. Window 7's light glows green, steady. The name tag shifts when the clerk bends to pull another form, and I catch it for the first time. Aaliyah. Aaliyah turns the monitor a degree toward us, professional and calm. I'm going to read you what I see, she says. 2 outstanding toll-by-plate violations totaling $212 and 1 red light camera citation for $168. There's also a processing fee for the plan if you choose that route. Grace exhales through her nose, small and sharp. Those cameras are a scam, she mutters, but quieter than before. Aaliyah nods like she's heard it 1,000 times without taking it personally. She taps, then clicks a thumbnail and brings up a grainy still. She doesn't editorialize. She just uses her pen to indicate the corners of the image. This is the red light citation. Timestamp is here. She taps the strip at the bottom. That's the turn line. And in the mirror, there. The reflection shows the oversized round lenses I know. On the second image, the car seat strap that always flips sits crooked. On the third, the mug with the chip flashes in my cup holder. Aaliyah's finger moves from the picture to the bolded amount due on her screen. Those are the balances. I make myself keep my face soft. I'm not here to say I told you so. I'm here so I stop being the person who quietly pays and pretends it's nothing. I shift half a step back and let the counter hold all the weight. What's the plan look like? Grace asks finally. For the tolls, Aaliyah says, pulling out a thin form. We can do a payment agreement with 25% down today, then monthly drafts until the balance is paid. The red light citation can be combined with a separate plan or paid today. She slides the paper across with a pen clipped to the top. Initial here to confirm you're the responsible party. Sign at the bottom. The words land. Responsible party. Grace's hand wobbles. She signs anyway. Her handwriting is careful and too round. Card for the initial payment, Aaliyah says. Grace pulls a scuffed debit card out of her wallet and hands it over. Aaliyah keys the amount and turns the little screen our way. It reads, initial payment 95 $, processing fee 3 $, total 98 $. Grace bites her lip and taps her pin. The machine thinks for a beat too long. Come on, Grace whispers to it, as if that helps. For a second the screen flashes red and my stomach flips and wants to do the old thing. Reach for my wallet. Fix it. Make it go away. I keep my hands at my sides. The machine chirps and turns green. Approved. Aaliyah doesn't flinch. She just prints a receipt and attaches a copy of the plan. Okay, she says, efficient and kind. That sets the tolls. For the red light citation, same options apply. If you add it to the plan, the down today is the same percentage, and it extends the schedule by 1 month. If you pay it in full, the hold comes off immediately. Grace swallows. How much to pay it today? 168, Aaliyah says, already ready with the second slip. Grace looks at me the way you look at a person you've always used as your safety net, without asking if they were made for that. I don't say anything. I just meet her eyes and then look at the slip. She digs around in her purse and pulls out a different card, the one with a scratch across the front. She taps it, hesitates, then inserts it. The terminal beeps. Another long pause. Approved. Aaliyah stamps 2 places, and the thunks feel like a door closing carefully instead of slamming. I've released the hold, she says, cursor moving. Do you want to renew your registration today as well? Grace nods, small. Yeah. Standard renewal plus late fee, Aaliyah recites. Total is 68. She processes it like she's done it 1,000,000 times, because she has. A sticker decal slides from a little printer with our county outline on it. She circles the expiration month with a pen and hands it across with the receipts. This goes on your plate. Clean the corner before you stick it so it doesn't curl. Grace takes it like it might bite. Thanks, she says, voice thin. Aaliyah looks between us without curiosity, then back to her screen. You're all set. Next. We step away from the window into the hum of the room. Grace gathers the papers like they're heavier than they should be. Outside, the sun hits us square. The asphalt radiates heat up through our shoes. We don't talk until we're at my car. Grace stands on the passenger side and stares at the decal in her hand. I thought you'd cover me like always, she says, not accusing, just saying it out loud to see how it sounds in the air. I can't be the plan anymore, I say. I can help, but I'm not the plan. She nods once, like the word lands and lodges. She reaches into her bag and pulls out the black lanyard I've seen 100 times with the little blue bead I threaded years ago so I could find the spare by feel. The key ring is empty now. She holds it up half an inch like muscle memory is stronger than facts, then looks at the bare metal circle and huffs one short laugh. Right, she says, and drops it back into her purse. We both look at my closed glove box, and I think about the lockbox at home, the click of it settling into wood. I unlock the doors and we climb in. My phone pings as it reconnects. A few messages roll in. Missed call. Mom. Then a text. Dinner Sunday? We should talk. I don't answer yet. I drive Grace back to her place in the kind of quiet that isn't a fight, just a space we both have to learn how to cross without shortcuts. When I pull up to the curb, she gathers the paperwork and the decal and rests her hand on the door handle. Thanks for the ride, she says. You're welcome, I say. Text me if you want me to watch Lucy while you stick that on. She nods, then gets out. In my rear view, I see her stand in the sun for a second, then head toward her building with the stack of papers against her chest like a shield. I take a breath that feels like it has somewhere to go and switch my phone out of Do Not Disturb. The last text from Mom sits at the top, patient. I tap the screen off and drive home. Sunday smells like spaghetti and garlic. I park by Mom's curb and carry in a bag of salad and a loaf of bread. The TV hums low in the living room, some nature show with soft narration, and Lucy is at the table in a booster, already orange with sauce and very proud of it. Hi, baby, Mom says, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She kisses my cheek and points me toward a bowl to toss the salad. On the counter there's a stack of paper plates and the Tupperware of snickerdoodles from earlier in the week, one corner already open. Grace is at the sink running water over a colander of noodles. She glances up, then back down. Hey, she says. Hey, I say. I set the bread on a cutting board and start slicing, each piece even because even feels good right now. We eat first, because we're not maniacs. Lucy declares the spaghetti noodles long and offers me one like a worm. Mom keeps the TV low enough to be polite. The ceiling fan clicks in that one spot it always clicks. After plates are mostly empty and Lucy is tired of sitting still, Mom hands her a crayon and a placemat and gives me a look that means, now. I want to talk about what I can do, I say, palms flat on the table. And what I can't. Mom nods, eyes on my hands instead of my face. Go ahead. I can do rides if we schedule them, I say. If you need groceries, I can do Thursday after work. If Lucy needs pickup, I can do it most days at 3:15 as long as I know by noon the day before. But I'm not lending my car, and I'm not signing for anything that isn't mine. Grace stares at the last piece of bread like she's reading it. Okay, she says, quiet. I added the red light to the plan and paid what I had to pay. The auto drafts start next month. Good, I say. That keeps your registration clean. Mom folds a paper towel into smaller and smaller squares. I shouldn't have put your name on that paper, she says finally, not quite looking at me. I don't know what I thought. I just wanted it to not be a fight. It was already a fight, I say. It just wasn't loud. She lets out a breath. I don't like all the keeping track, she says, waving a hand at nothing. It feels cold. It's a schedule, I say. I pull my little spiral from my bag, more for me than for them. It keeps me from guessing and getting mad. It makes sure I show up when I say I will. Grace taps her finger on the table. Can I ask now? She says. Wednesday. I have the late shift. Could you get Lucy at 3:15 and keep her until 5? I flip to a fresh page. Wednesday, I repeat, and check my calendar on my phone. Clinic meeting ends at 3 that day. I can make it. Yes, I say. Text the daycare again so they don't act like they don't know me. She nods. I will. Mom clears her throat. Grocery list on Thursday? She offers. I can Venmo you. Text the list Wednesday night, I say. I'll go after work. You can give me cash when I drop them off if that's easier. She laughs once, short. Look at us. Civilized. Lucy drops her crayon and yells, Oh, like the house needs to evacuate. I pick it up and hand it back. She leans over and pats my arm like I just did something very brave. Sauce streaks my sleeve. We stack plates and wash dishes the way we always have. Easy choreography of passing and drying. Grace lingers by the sink after the water's off. I really am sorry, she says, too low for Mom to hear. I didn't think. She lifts one shoulder. I'm paying it, I'll handle it. I know, I say. Thank you. On the couch, Mom pulls a zip-top bag of basil leaves from behind a plant that's giving up. Take these, she says. They're the last decent ones. Okay, I say. It's her way of making an offering without making it about money. When I stand to go, Mom stops me with a hand on my wrist. I'm trying, she says. I know I push. I don't want you to feel like the only adult in the room. We're all adults in the room, I say. That's the point. She nods and lets go. Text when you get home. Outside, the humidity sits heavy and familiar. I drive the 10 minutes back with the AC on low and the radio low enough to be almost off. In my apartment, I slide the basil into a glass of water and tuck the notebook back into my bag. I write one line. Wednesday, Lucy 3:15, 5, yes. Then, Thursday, groceries for Mom, yes. List, wed. My phone buzzes. The family group chat lights up with a new message from Mom. Groceries, Thursday, milk, eggs, salad, toothpaste. Total me after. Grace adds, Wednesday pickup. Added you with Ms. Carla at daycare. No dots, no hints, no whispers. I send a thumbs up, then a quick, got it. See you both this week. I put the spare key back in the lockbox and spin the dial to Lucy's birthday until it clicks. It's the same sound it made the day I installed it, but it lands different now. Less like a barricade, more like a boundary I don't have to explain every time. Before bed, Shanice texts a single check mark and, how'd Sunday go? We made a schedule, I send back. No more speeches. Good, she replies. Sleep. I lie down and my brain doesn't sprint. The old guilt knocks once, polite and late, and finds the door locked. In the morning, the bowl by my front door will just be a bowl. The car will still be mine. The people I love will still be mine too. Asked for, not taken. Boundaries work.